Welcome to Episode 2 of The Path to Heaven. After surviving betrayal inside the cavern, Nguy Tac walks away with more than just spirit stones. New spells, rare treasures, and an unexpected fortune are beginning to push this once-broke cultivator onto a very different path. But wealth brings new opportunities and new dangers. From the auction halls of Linh Yak City to the deadly depths of Vanzeka Valley, Nguy Tac will test his growing strength, sharpen his talisman skills, and discover just how dangerous the cultivation world becomes once real power starts entering the game. And this time, running into trouble may mean facing something far worse than another greedy cultivator. This is Episode 2 of The Path to Heaven. A startled cry rang out. It came from Nam Kung Vu Tin, followed by a dull impact that sounded as though a spell had struck flesh. Almost by instinct, Nguy Tac pulled the night luminous pearl from inside his robe. Soft light spilled from the pearl. The moment he got a clear look at the cavern, he sucked in a sharp breath. Lam Dao Nhat, who had been standing not far from him, was now beside the ice mist fruit tree. He was looking at Nam Kung Vu Tin and the Diep siblings with an almost sympathetic expression. Nam Kung Vu Tin, who had been some distance away only moments ago, had retreated to Nguy Tac's side. Her face was pale, blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, and she was obviously badly injured. Several tears had appeared in the tight red armor she wore. One of them was close to her chest, and from where Nguy Tac stood, he could clearly see a pale, rounded curve beneath the white undergarment. That half-hidden glimpse was even more provocative than seeing everything outright, and a certain part of Nguy Tac's body immediately reacted. Lam Dao Nhat, what's going on? Diep Tu Chin asked blankly. The honest young man stood there staring between Lam Dao Nhat and Nam Kung Vu Tin, clearly unable to understand what had happened. What else could it be? Isn't it obvious? Nguy Tac said while pouring true essence into his spirit heaven jade pendant. He's robbing us. Lam Dao Nhat, you actually dare do this? Nam Kung Vu Ting's icy voice rang out at the same time. Even if you're confident you can deal with us, aren't you afraid Thiet Sach will hunt you to the ends of the earth? Strong words, Nguy Tac muttered, sneaking another glance at the pale curve visible through the tear in Nam Kung Vu Ting's soft armor. But aren't they a little pointless? If he were afraid, he wouldn't have done it in the first place. He sighed inwardly. He only teamed up with other cultivators to hunt demonic beasts once or twice a year. He had finally agreed to join a group this time, and trouble had already found him. Lam Dao Nhat, you dare betray us? Diep Tu Chin finally understood what was happening and roared in fury. What I have is only an imitation of a spirit-grade magical treasure. Its power can't compare with that treasure fragment of yours, but as long as I feed it true essence, I can use it repeatedly. Lam Dao Nhat completely ignored Diep Tu Chin. He looked calmly at Nam Kung Vu Tin. With your meridians damaged this badly, even if you can still cast spells, your strength is probably no better than a second-level Divine Sea cultivator now, right? As for Thiet Sach, yes, they're formidable. But if I kill every last one of you, then by the time they discover what happened, I'll already be long gone. The Thian Huyan continent is enormous. Do you really think an organization like Thiet Sach could find me wherever I choose to hide? Lam Dao Nhat, we trusted you, Diep Tu Chin shouted. And you're turning on us for a few treasures? Seeing Lam Dao Nhat act as though they were already dead, Diep Tu Chin could no longer restrain himself. Golden light burst from his body. Blood-red currents gathered around his hands, and he charged forward, swinging his heavy sword. Deep Kovai clenched her teeth as well. The bead of water before her split into 3 water arrows and shot toward Lam Dao Nhat. White water barrier, Lam Dao Nhat calmly formed a hand seal. Mist surged around him and condensed into a transparent screen of water shaped like a giant bubble. Diep Kovai's 3 water arrows struck it, throwing up 3 sprays of water, but not one managed to break through. Without the slightest hurry, Lam Dao Nhat formed another seal. Boom! A dazzling bolt of golden lightning erupted from his hand and smashed into Diep Tu Chin. The lightning exploded across Diep Tu Chin's body, splitting into more than a dozen finger-thick arcs that crackled violently. Diep Tu Chin groaned in pain and staggered back 5 or 6 steps. More than a dozen wounds appeared across the faint layer of golden protective light around his body. His muscles contracted uncontrollably, as though he had been struck by a thunderbolt from the heavens. Damn! Nguy Tac's eyes widened. Lam Dao Nhat's lightning spell was not only extremely powerful, it also numbed the opponent and restricted movement. More importantly, the woven mass of lightning was no weaker than the fireball released by a fireball talisman. If Lam Dao Nhat could casually unleash a spell with that kind of power, then he was also a 5th-level Divine Sea cultivator. Nguy Tac was not the only one who realized it. Diep Kovai's face immediately went pale. Nam Kung Vu Ting, none of you are my match. Seeing the expressions on Diep Kovai and Nam Kung Vu Tin, Lam Dao Nhat became even more pleased with himself. Before this, he had appeared upright and refined, always speaking in a friendly manner. Now, however, His gaze lingered shamelessly on the tears in Nam Kung Vu Ting's soft armor. "If you're willing to obey me, I can spare your life," he said with a lecherous smile. "There aren't many women in all of Linyak City as beautiful as you." "Lam Dao Nhat, keep dreaming." Nam Kung Vu Ting trembled with rage. "Is that so? Then I'll capture you first and we can talk afterward." Lam Dao Nhat chuckled darkly. His eyes traveled over Nam Kung Vu Ting's long legs and paused beneath her lower abdomen. "I doubt you've ever tasted the pleasures between a man and a woman. Who knows? Once you try it, maybe you won't be able to leave me." A chill ran through Nam Kung Vu Ting. Under Lam Dao Nhat's filthy gaze, she felt as though he were stripping away every layer of clothing with his eyes. Then she suddenly heard Nguy Tac chuckle. "Brother Lam, I didn't realize your tastes were so refined." The moment those words left Nguy Tac's mouth, not only Nam Kung Vu Ting and the others, but even Lam Dao Nhat stared at him in surprise. No one understood what he meant. "Heh heh, she's this hot and she's dressed in armor like that. I've been having trouble holding myself back for a long time." Nguy Tac rubbed his hands together and swallowed, wearing an openly lecherous grin. "To tell you the truth, I've also wanted to find a chance to capture her and have some fun. I just didn't expect Brother Lam to be so capable that you'd make your move right here. But since you dared do this, I suppose your cultivation really is at the 5th level of the Divine Sea Realm. That's far beyond a little cultivator like me." At those words, Nam Kung Vu Ting and the others looked even more disgusted. Lam Dao Nhat, however, was slightly surprised. "What exactly are you trying to say? The mortal women in Liuha Alley are all ordinary goods. How could they compare to female cultivators?" Nguy Tac said, his gaze drifting lustfully toward Diep Kovi. "I've always liked Nam Kung Vu Ting, but Diep Kovi isn't bad either. How about the two of us join forces and capture them?" "You can have Nam Kung Vu Ting. I only want little beauty Diep Kovi. I've had my eye on her for a while too." So he has the same idea. Lam Dao Nhat's thoughts raced. If Nguy Tac joined him, victory would be absolutely certain. A smile appeared on his face. "I didn't expect Brother Nguy to share my interests, but I'm still not completely at ease. What if you take your little beauty now, then later report me to Thiet Sak? That would put me in quite a difficult position." He paused, then smiled meaningfully. "Since you like Nam Kung Vu Ting too, I have an idea. After I'm finished with her, you can have your turn as well. Then I'll know we're truly in the same boat." "Haha. If Brother Lam doesn't mind, how could I possibly refuse?" Nguy Tac looked extremely excited. "If Brother Lam is interested, the 4 of us could even do it together and then trade partners afterward. Back in Liuha Alley, a friend and I tried something similar once. I picked up a few tricks." Lam Dao Nhat's blood immediately heated. He looked at Nam Kung Vu Ting and Diep Kovi, his head already filled with obscene thoughts about what he would do to the two beauties. And then boom! No one expected the blazing fireball that suddenly shot from Nguy Tac's hand. It slammed directly into Lam Dao Nhat. Ah! Lam Dao Nhat was caught completely off guard. He hurriedly cast his white water barrier again, but the watery shield could not withstand the fireball. Exploding tongues of flame tore through it and engulfed him. His entire body burst into flames. Even his hair caught fire, leaving him looking even worse than Nguy Tac's own formerly scorched, wild hairstyle. "A fireball talisman! Nguy Tac, you tricked me!" Lam Dao Nhat frantically pulled something from his robes while desperately trying to put out the flames. Moments earlier, when Nam Kung Vu Ting and Diep Kovi heard Nguy Tac talking about taking the 4 of them together and trading partners afterward, they had wanted to drag him down to hell with Lam Dao Nhat. Neither of them had expected that the 2 men who had just been laughing like perverts would suddenly become enemies with Nguy Tac blasting Lam Dao Nhat with a fireball talisman. What nearly made the 2 women faint, however, was what happened next. Nguy Tac planted his hands on his hips and stared at the blackened Lam Dao Nhat with an expression of absolute moral righteousness. "You actually believe that nonsense I told you? You even wanted to do it for real? You're a damn animal." "Me? An animal?" Lam Dao Nhat's mouth fell open. "You were the one who just said you've been lusting after Nam Kung Vu Ting for ages. You were the one talking about the 4 of us doing it together and trading partners. And now you're calling me an animal?" For a moment, Lam Dao Nhat was completely speechless. He could not understand where a mere 3rd-level Divine Sea cultivator like Nguy Tac had found the courage to pull something like this. "What are you staring at? Get over here!" Nguy Tac called Nam Kung Vu Ting and the others to his side. Although all 3 of them doubted that Nguy Tac had enough strength to fight Lam Dao Nhat, Nam Kung Vu Ting, Diep Kovi, and Diep Tiu Chin had just been struck by Lam Dao Nhat's lightning spell. Their bodies were still stiff and difficult to move, so they quickly gathered around him. He said that thing in his hand is some kind of imitation magical treasure. Its power must be extraordinary. "If any of you have defensive artifacts, bring them out now." Nguy Tac spoke quickly. Diep Kovi seemed to wake from a daze. The delicate-looking girl immediately took out a black talisman. Nguy Tac accepted it and poured in his true essence. At once, a black shield roughly 3 feet across has appeared before them. Its surface resembled the shell of a black tortoise. A mystic armor talisman? Nguy Tac was slightly surprised. What Diep Co V had given him was a second-tier defensive talisman. The black shield created by the second-tier mystic armor talisman was 2 or 3 times stronger and lasted 2 or 3 times longer than the earthen shield produced by his Earth Shield treasure talisman. Nam Kung Vu Ting and Diep Tu Chin both shook their heads. Apparently, neither of them had any defensive artifacts. Nguy Tac, I am going to kill you. Lam Dao Nhat had finally recovered his composure. He activated a green jade talisman, and a deep green wall of wind appeared in front of him. Nguy Tac curled his lip in contempt. At this point, even a pig could tell that Lam Dao Nhat wanted him dead. Saying it aloud was completely pointless. But while Nguy Tac looked disdainful on the outside, he was actually extremely nervous. This was the first time in his life he had fought another cultivator. He had no idea what the green jade talisman in Lam Dao Nhat's hand was, but countless violent currents swirled through the wall of wind before him. Its defensive power looked terrifying. The jade talisman itself still shimmered with green light. It was probably similar to Nguy Tac's Earth Shield treasure talisman, a treasure talisman that could be activated more than once. Lam Dao Nhat raised his other hand. Only then did Nguy Tac and the others clearly see the strange object he was holding. It resembled a block of yellow metal. True essence surged into it. 5 or 6 strange runes of light appeared above the object, and in the next instant, they condensed into several golden blades that screamed through the air toward the black shield. Clang! 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 A violent series of impacts rang through the cavern. Nguy Tac instinctively pulled his neck back and swallowed. Several deep cracks had appeared across the surface of the black shield, created by the second-tier mystic armor talisman. On the Tianhuiyan continent, magical treasures were divided into 4 major grades: spirit, arcane, mystic, and immortal. Nguy Tac had once seen a wandering cultivator use a genuine magical treasure to kill a 3rd-tier demonic beast. At the time, all he had seen was a streak of black light flash out and instantly kill the beast. He knew it was powerful, but he had never truly understood just how great the difference was. Now, facing one himself, even an imitation of a spirit-grade magical treasure possessed such frightening power. For the first time, Nguy Tac gained a real sense of how terrifying genuine magical treasures must be. Whoosh! Whoosh! Nguy Tac launched a counterattack. He fired an azure water blade. Diep Co V released 3 water arrows, while Nam Kung Vu Ting sent out a blade of flame. But because Nam Kung Vu Ting was badly injured, the power of her flame blade had fallen drastically. It was now only about as strong as Nguy Tac's azure water blade. To Nguy Tac's frustration, the moment their spells struck Lam Dao Nhat's wind wall, the violent currents inside tore them apart. The defensive power of Lam Dao Nhat's green treasure talisman was also comparable to a second-tier defensive talisman. Nguy Tac, you'll regret this. Lam Dao Nhat stared at him with murderous eyes. At the same time, the imitation magical treasure in his hand released another volley of golden blades. Clang! 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 Another violent series of impacts rang out. More cracks spread across the black shield, leaving it as ragged as a torn leaf. Boom! The shield still had not completely shattered when a yellow lightning sphere came crashing after it. Already riddled with cracks, the black shield could no longer endure the strain. Crack! It burst apart. Bang! At the same instant, the temperature inside the cavern suddenly rose. A fireball the size of a wagon wheel exploded against Lam Dao Nhat's wind wall, making the entire barrier tremble. A fireball talisman? I didn't expect. Lam Dao Nhat had been about to say, I didn't expect you to have 2 fireball talismans. Before he could finish the sentence, another tongue of flame slammed into the wind wall, making it shake violently. Many of the cutting gusts inside scattered in all directions, and the barrier's power dropped noticeably. Another fireball talisman? How many did you buy? After Nguy Tac activated 1 talisman, Lam Dao Nhat froze. To his disbelief, Nguy Tac had already pulled out another red fireball talisman. For a moment, Lam Dao Nhat did not even have time to activate his imitation treasure. Nguy Tac seized the opening. With another flick of his hand, he triggered the next fireball talisman. The fireball smashed into the weakened wind wall. At last, the barrier could no longer endure it. The wall exploded into countless violent streams of wind. The moment Lam Dao Nhat's defense broke, Diep Co V and Nam Kung Vu Tin immediately launched a water arrow and a flame blade. But in that same instant, the green treasure talisman in Lam Dao Nhat's hand flashed again. Another identical wind wall rose before him. Bang! Almost without pause, the cavern heated up again. Another fireball crashed into the newly formed barrier. No wonder you dared act so arrogant in front of me. So you brought quite a few fire talismans. With the fireball exploding against his wind wall, Lam Dao Nhat had now regained his calm. He looked at Nguy Tac with open contempt. My Windlord treasure talisman can be activated 12 times. If you think you have enough fireball talismans to break through every layer of my defense, Then go ahead and try. Lam Dao Nhat was not bluffing. He had obtained this Windlord treasure talisman from the remains of a cultivator during one of his demonic beast hunts. It was still almost unused and could be activated 12 times. Each wind wall could withstand the attacks of roughly 3 fireball talismans. That meant Nguy Tac would need 36 fireball talismans to completely exhaust the power of the Windlord treasure talisman. Nam Kung Vu Ting had already been badly injured by Lam Dao Nhat's sneak attack. With the cultivation levels of Nguy Tac and the others, only talismans with this much power could break the Windlord treasure talisman's barriers. 36 fireball talismans. What idiotic low-level wandering cultivator would ever spend money on that many identical talismans just to carry them around? Lam Dao Nhat thought exactly that. Boom, boom, boom! One blazing fireball after another lit up the cavern. How is this possible? At first, Lam Dao Nhat had stood there calmly, staring at Nguy Tac with mocking eyes. A short while later, his eyes were bulging like those of a dead fish. How the hell does he have so many fireball talismans? Behind Nguy Tac, Nam Kung Vu Ting and Diep Ko Vi were wondering the exact same thing. No matter how they looked at him, Nguy Tac was the most ordinary kind of low-level wandering cultivator imaginable. The true essence cultivation art he practiced was a very common low-grade technique, and the only offensive spell he had shown was the unremarkable Azure Water Blade. Yet in only a short span of time, he had activated more than a dozen fireball talismans and blasted apart 5 of Lam Dao Nhat's wind walls. Before one talisman had even finished burning, another was already in his hand. It looked as though he still had plenty left. Even if a low-level wandering cultivator suddenly became rich, he would normally buy a variety of talismans and artifacts for different situations. No one would spend everything on a single type of talisman, unless that person was an idiot. Nguy Tac's hair might have made him look like one, but in truth, he was far more calculating than most people. Die. Lam Dao Nhat had originally intended to stand behind his defenses and let Nguy Tac burn through his entire supply of fireball talismans, just so he could see what expression Nguy Tac made when they were gone. But after 5 wind walls were destroyed in succession, he finally lost patience. True essence surged into the yellow imitation treasure in his hand. Several glowing runes appeared once more. The imitation treasure was clearly weaker than the genuine magical treasure it had been copied from. Even so, the glowing runes passed effortlessly through Lam Dao Nhat's own wind wall. Once outside, they gathered the surrounding spiritual energy and condensed into several golden blades. The blades slashed straight toward Nguy Tac. Nguy Tac had already filled his spirit heaven jade pond with true essence. The instant the golden blades tore through the air toward them, a luminous barrier sprang up around him. Nam Kung Vu Tin and the Diep siblings. Crack! 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 After only a few strikes, the glowing barrier shook violently and looked ready to collapse. You've got to be kidding me! Nguy Tac jumped in alarm. He hurriedly pulled out the golden light talisman he had bought earlier and activated it. A second pale golden shield appeared outside the spirit heaven jade pendant's fading barrier. Let's see which is stronger, your fireball talismans or my imitation magical treasure. Seeing Nguy Tac scrambling to defend himself, Lam Dao Nhat ground his teeth and poured even more true essence into the imitation treasure. The yellow metal block immediately released several brighter golden runes, but Lam Dao Nhat's face turned pale. His true essence was nearly exhausted. He pulled out 2 bottles of chi recovery powder and poured them into his mouth. Crack! Crack! The golden shield from the golden light talisman, the one Nguy Tac had paid half a low-grade spirit stone for, shattered first. A moment later, the inner barrier from the spirit heaven jade pendant broke apart like an eggshell. Diep Tu Chin stepped forward and raised his massive sword horizontally like a door in front of Nguy Tac. The remaining golden blade struck it. Clang! Even while using the great strength art, Diep Tu Chin felt both arms go numb. He almost lost his grip on the heavy sword and was driven backward until he nearly fell on top of Nguy Tac. When he looked down at the weapon, even the normally simple and straightforward Diep Tu Chin was shocked. The heavy sword had been forged from mystic iron, yet the golden blade had carved a deep gash into its surface. Nguy Tac, crouching behind that enormous sword, was nearly forced flat onto the ground. Haha, die! Seeing their formation in chaos, Lam Dao Nhat laughed wildly and once again poured true essence into his imitation treasure. He was certain Nguy Tac could not survive another attack. But the moment the laugh left his mouth, it stopped abruptly, like a duck having its neck squeezed. A small earth-yellow shield had appeared in front of Nguy Tac. Then Nguy Tac reached into his robe and pulled out fireball talismans. Not 1, not 2, 6 or 7 at once. He kept one for himself, then shoved the rest into the hands of Nam Kung Vu Ting, Diep Ko Vi, and even Diep Tu Chin. To hell with his imitation treasure. Everyone blast him! Nguy Tac handed each of them 2 fireball talismans. How many fireball talismans does this bastard actually have? At that point, Lam Dao Nhat's confidence finally collapsed. Crack! His control over the true essence pouring into the imitation treasure slipped. Too much energy surged into it at once. If it had been the genuine magical treasure, Lam Dao Nhat's level of cultivation would not have caused any problem even with that much true essence. But the thing in his hand was only an imitation. Its materials were vastly inferior to those of the original treasure. Instead of releasing more golden runes, several long cracks spread across the yellow metal block. Boom, 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 boom! At the same moment, Lam Dao Nhat's face went white. 4 fireballs smashed into his wind wall, one after another. The third fireball shattered the entire barrier. The fourth struck Lam Dao Nhat directly. Ah! His body was blasted into the air. With a piercing scream, the upper half of his body was swallowed in raging flames before he crashed heavily onto the cavern floor. The icy energy radiating from the ice silk spider webs wrapped around the nearby dried corpses quickly smothered the flames. But it no longer mattered. Lam Dao Nhat's head had been roasted like a baked potato. He was already dead. Damn it. Only after seeing Lam Dao Nhat lying motionless did Nguy Tac finally breathe out and wipe the sweat from his forehead. Fighting another cultivator was far more dangerous than fighting a demonic beast. A demonic beast had fixed habits and recognizable weaknesses. People, on the other hand, were full of tricks. Nguy Tac had been lucky enough to carry a ridiculous number of fireball talismans. Otherwise, he might have advanced to the 3rd level of the Divine Sea realm only to die a few days later at the hands of a companion-turned bandit, before he even had time to enjoy his breakthrough. A powerful 5th level Divine Sea cultivator, armed with a formidable treasure talisman and an imitation magical treasure, had just been killed by a 3rd level Divine Sea cultivator. Nam Kung Vu Ting and Diep Ko Vi both felt as though they were dreaming. Yet the fireball talisman still in each of their hands was very real, and it was still giving off faint heat. Damn it. By then, Nguy Tac's attention had already shifted completely to the block-like imitation treasure in Lam Dao Nhat's hand. It looked plain, yet it had been even more powerful than a 2nd-tier treasure talisman. It had to be worth a huge number of spirit stones. More importantly, treasures like this could not simply be bought. A person could walk around holding an entire sack of stones and still find no one willing to sell one. Nguy Tac wanted it so badly his chest hurt. But although he had killed plenty of demonic beasts, this was the first person he had ever killed. No matter how badly he wanted the treasure, the sight of Lam Dao Nhat's corpse made him unwilling to walk over and pry it from the dead man's hand. "Brother Diep," Nguy Tac said after his eyes darted around for a moment. "I suspect he's pretending to be dead. That imitation treasure of his is extremely powerful. Why don't you go over and take it from him? We'll watch from here. If he makes even the slightest move, we'll immediately reward him with another fireball talisman." Pretending to be dead? Nam Kung Vu Ting stared at Nguy Tac. The more she had watched him during the fight, the more extraordinary she had thought he seemed. For a moment, she had even wondered whether he was some hidden expert, pretending to be a low-level cultivator while wandering the mortal world for amusement. But now, she nearly burst out laughing. Lam Dao Nhat's head had been roasted like a potato. If he could still fake his death in that condition, then he really would be extraordinary. Just from Nguy Tac's behavior, Nam Kung Vu Tin could tell that he truly was a low-level cultivator. This was probably his first time killing another person. He was so uncomfortable that he would not even look in Lam Dao Nhat's direction while speaking. "He's definitely dead." Diep Tu Chin was an honest man. At Nguy Tac's request, he nodded, walked over, checked Lam Dao Nhat carefully, and gave his verdict. Nguy Tac still refused to look at the corpse. He waved his hand. "Then, Brother Diep, please see if he has anything useful on him." "All right." Diep Tu Chin searched Lam Dao Nhat thoroughly. After a while, he removed 2 black leather pouches from the man's waist. He found nothing else hidden on the body. Then he opened Lam Dao Nhat's hand, took the imitation treasure and the green treasure talisman, and returned to Nguy Tac. He handed everything over. "Ah, damn it! It's ruined!" Nguy Tac eagerly accepted the items, but the moment he looked at the imitation treasure, he let out a miserable cry. Seen up close, the object looked almost like a square metal brick. It was surprisingly heavy, as if it had been cast from solid metal. There were no markings on the bottom, while the top bore an unusual pattern resembling 8 tiny swords pointing upward. Unfortunately, cracks covered it from one end to the other. There was not a trace of spiritual light left. It was completely destroyed and could no longer be used. The green jade talisman, however, was still intact. This was the treasure talisman that could create the wind wall. Its surface still shimmered like flowing water, and deep green patterns could be seen inside. It looked as though it could still be activated several more times. "I wonder if he has anything else good." Lam Dao Nhat's 2 black leather pouches were made from very tough material, their mouths tied shut with black leather cords. Nguy Tac easily opened the first one. Wahahaha! The moment he dumped the contents out, his eyes lit up. The pouch was filled with round spirit stones. At first glance, there seemed to be only a little more than 10. 8 or 9 of them were low-grade spirit stones glowing with green light. But among them were 3 stones of similar size that gave off a faint yellow glow. The spiritual energy inside those 3 was far denser than that of low-grade spirit stones. They were mid-grade spirit stones. Each contained 10 times as much spiritual energy and was worth 10 low-grade spirit stones. That meant Lam Dao Nhat's little pouch held the equivalent of 39 low-grade spirit stones. The sight instantly erased Nguy Tac's disappointment over the broken imitation treasure. Brother Lam Dao Nhat really was a good man. Carrying this many spirit stones around for me, the other pouch should be stuffed with valuable things too. Grinning from ear to ear, Nguy Tac opened the second pouch. Key recovery pills. The first thing to fall out was a white medicine bottle. Nguy Tac opened the cap. A familiar fragrance immediately drifted out, and his grin grew even wider. Qi recovery pills were made by concentrating the medicinal liquid of qi recovery powder. They also restored true essence quickly, but their effect was 3 or 4 times stronger. With Nguy Tac's purple mystic true art at the 3rd level of the divine sea realm, if he completely exhausted his true essence, he would need at least a bottle and a half of qi recovery powder to fully recover. Half a qi recovery pill would do the same. Each qi recovery pill was worth 2 low-grade spirit stones. Lam Dao Nhat's bottle contained 4 emerald green pills. Ironically, despite carrying the pills, Lam Dao Nhat normally only dared use the cheaper qi recovery powder. A 5th-level divine sea cultivator really does have a decent fortune. So rich, and he still let greed blind him. What's this? Besides the bottle containing 4 qi recovery pills, the pouch also held 2 green jade slips and a torn piece of coarse cloth. The jade slips were smooth and almost completely unmarked except for a tiny yin-yang symbol on each one. The torn cloth, meanwhile, had several place names written across it in ancient script and looked very much like a fragment of a map. A yin-yang symbol. Green jade slips with yin-yang symbols. Nguy Tac studied them for a moment, then suddenly burst into delighted laughter. Ha! I understand. These 2 jade slips must be a paired set of yin-yang jade talismans. One for offense and one for defense. They can turn into a yin-yang defense formation, and they can also transform into a yin-yang attack. Ha! Seeing how certain he sounded, Nam Kung Vu Tin finally could not hold back and laughed. What? Nguy Tac looked at her strangely. They're not yin-yang jade talismans? Nam Kung Vu Tin struggled to stop laughing before finally nodding. They're green jade spell slips from the Tianko Pavilion. They probably contain spells sold by the pavilion. The yin-yang symbol isn't part of the talisman formation. It's the emblem of the Tianko Pavilion. Ah? Nguy Tac froze, his face turning red. The Tianko Pavilion was one of the major marketplaces in southern Nguy City and often held auctions. It was simply far too extravagant a place for someone like Nguy Tac, so he had never learned what its emblem looked like. He had mistaken the shop's mark for a magical rune. That was truly embarrassing. There's another problem, Nam Kung Vu Ting continued. Every green jade spell slip sold by the Tianko Pavilion is sealed with a restriction. Only the original buyer can read what's inside. Smiling, she took one of the jade slips and poured true essence into it. The yin-yang symbol released a layer of green light that formed a small protective halo around the slip. There's a restriction too? Nguy Tac stared at it miserably. There's no way to break it? As far as I know, no one in Nguy City can break this restriction except the people of the Tianko Pavilion themselves. But if you bring an undamaged green jade spell slip back to them, they'll buy it for 2 low-grade spirit stones. Son of a, what a damn scam! Nguy Tac could not help cursing. Spells were normally extremely expensive. Even his mediocre azure water blade art was worth around 20 low-grade spirit stones. And because knowing someone's spells made it much easier to deal with them outside the city, cultivators guarded their techniques very carefully. That was also why Nguy Tac still knew only this one unimpressive azure water blade spell. The Tianko Pavilion sold spell techniques for high prices, then bought the sealed jade slips back for only 2 low-grade spirit stones. Wasn't that practically robbery in broad daylight? What about this? The only thing left was the torn piece of cloth. No matter how Nguy Tac looked at it, it resembled a map fragment, but the material was unusual. After embarrassing himself with the jade slips, he no longer dared make wild guesses and simply asked Nam Kung Vu Tin. If it looked like a map but turned out to be some strange talisman instead, he would lose even more face. To his horror, Nam Kung Vu Ting glanced at it and said, "It should be a fragment of a map showing somewhere in the demonic beast wilderness beyond the heaven's dome. I don't recognize the ancient writing though. Damn it." So, it really was a map. Nguy Tac fell silent. Now he felt even more ignorant than before. Still, Lam Dao Nhat's possessions alone were enough to leave him extremely excited. Some of the ice silk spiders' stored food seems to be cultivators. Why don't we search the bodies and see if there's anything useful? Nguy Tac immediately looked toward the cultivator corpse hanging from the cavern wall. his eyes faintly shining unnaturally. Nam Kung Vu Ting and the others had no objection. Anyone who entered the lair of a demonic beast would search it thoroughly. Nguy Tac was the first to hurry toward the corpse. He had just killed a person for the first time in his life and still did not dare look at Lam Dao Nhat's body. But this cultivator had been killed by an ice silk spider. With spirit stones potentially waiting on the corpse, Nguy Tac suddenly felt no fear at all. Ice silk spider webbing was extremely tough. Even his azure water blade might not have been able to cut through it. Fortunately, the spider had not wrapped this corpse in many layers, so the webbing did not prevent him from searching it. Nguy Tac carefully pulled aside the clothes of the unlucky cultivator, which had been stiffened by the freezing energy of the silk. The first thing to fall out was a bottle of key recovery powder. Next, he found a bright red first-tier fire rain talisman covered in intricate patterns, along with a white jade box. The light he had noticed earlier had been coming from that jade box. Strangely, however, the glowing box had no markings on its surface and was completely empty. Nguy Tac was somewhat disappointed. He searched the rest of the body, but this unfortunate cultivator seemed to have been even poorer than Nguy Tac used to be. Other than those few items, he carried nothing at all. Not even a single low-grade spirit stone. It took roughly the time needed to burn a stick of incense for the four of them to search the entire cavern. Besides the cultivator Nguy Tac had noticed, there were two other unlucky low-level cultivators who had been killed by the ice silk spiders. Either those two had been truly dirt poor, or they had used up most of their possessions while fighting the spiders. Between them, the group found only 4 low-grade spirit stones, several stalks of moonlight grass worth 2 low-grade spirit stones, and a spell scroll. The yellowed goatskin scroll contained only the wind blade art. It was even weaker than Nguy Tac's azure water blade. He took one look and set it aside without the slightest desire to learn it. 3 ice silk spiders, 2 gray rock snakes, everything taken from Lam Dao Nhat, and all the other items they had found in the cavern. They piled everything together. Now came the question of how to divide it. How about we split the spirit stones evenly, then sell everything else and divide the proceeds afterward? Just thinking about the value of the pile made Nguy Tac's eyes shine. The 3 ice silk spiders and 2 gray rock snakes alone were worth more than 200 low-grade spirit stones. Add Lam Dao Nhat's spirit stones, key recovery pills, and key recovery powder, and the total value had already passed 260 low-grade spirit stones. For wandering cultivators, that was no small fortune. And that did not even include treasures like the Windlord treasure talisman, which could still be used several more times. Selling everything and dividing the spirit stones evenly seemed like the fairest solution. The moment Nguy Tac finished speaking, however, the cavern fell silent. Split it evenly? Deep Tiu Chin stared at him in disbelief, then looked at Deep Ko Vi. He even asked again, as though he had misheard. Nguy Tac's heart immediately tightened. Don't tell me the 3 of them are planning to join forces and take everything? If it weren't for you, Brother Nguy, all of us would already be dead at Lam Dao Nhat's hands, Diep Tu Chin said. We were careless and nearly dragged you into disaster with us. And even after that, you're still talking about splitting everything equally? A friend like you is someone I, Diep Tu Chin, definitely want to know. He gestured toward the pile. You used so many fireball talismans in that fight. How could we possibly divide these things evenly? The reason my sister and I came here in the first place was for the ice silk spiders. At most, 1 spider is enough for us. Nguy Tac stared at him. So that was why this tall young man had looked so shocked. He was not planning to take everything. He only wanted 1 ice silk spider? What an amazing friend. I accepted a commission. Nam Kung Vu Ting said while Nguy Tac was still dazed. The price was agreed in advance at 40 low-grade spirit stones. Thait Sach has its rules. No matter how much treasure we end up finding, once the agreed fee is paid, that's enough. They're all good people. Nguy Tac nearly burst into tears from emotion. But if he agreed immediately, wouldn't he look far too greedy? So he forced himself to hesitate. Well, that doesn't seem quite right. All right, Deep Tu Chin nodded. If Brother Nguy thinks it isn't right, then after my sister and I take 1 ice silk spider, and Nam Kung Vu Tin receives her 40 low-grade spirit stones, we can divide the ice mist fruit tree and whatever is hidden inside the cold jade equally. He continued seriously. The ice mist fruit can be combined with fire element demonic cores to refine spirit pills. It can also increase the chance of successfully breaking through from the 5th level of the Divine Sea Realm into the Heavenly Circuit Realm. Nguy Tac, desperately wanted to slap himself. He already knew Diep Tia Chin was painfully honest. Why had he bothered pretending to be polite? He felt like crying without tears, but he could hardly take his words back now. So he put on the expression of a man who regarded spirit stones as dirt, valued friendship above all else, and placed money at a distant second. All right, then. After saying that, he looked hopefully at Nam Kung Vu Ting. Surely this hot, long-legged beauty would say that people from Thiet Sach always kept their word, that 40 low-grade spirit stones meant 40 and not one stone more. Surely she would insist that her share of the remaining treasure should go to Nguy Tac, and that if he forced her to accept it, she would become angry. Instead, his vision almost went dark when Nam Kung Vu Ting smiled. If it's a gift from friends, then accepting it doesn't violate Thiet Sach's rules. Nguy Tac, Nam Kung Vu Ting, Diep Ko Vi, and Diep Tu Chin stood before the ice mist fruit tree. Its branches were dark blue-green. The leaves resembled strange fern fronds carved from jade. 4 knot-shaped fruits hung from the branches, each releasing a faint white mist of freezing energy. The entire spiritual plant looked as though it were growing inside a cloud. Perhaps because the 3 ice silk spiders had not yet reached the stage where their demonic cores would advance, they had continued guarding the ice mist fruits rather than eating them. That had worked out perfectly for Nguy Tac and the others. Once a cultivator reached the peak of the 5th level of the Divine Sea Realm and attempted to break into the Heavenly Circuit Realm, the true essence inside the body had to surge through the acupoints and meridians. If that process went out of control, blood and energy could begin circulating too rapidly. The cultivator's body temperature would soar. In mild cases, it could damage the body. In severe cases, the cultivator could suffer cultivation deviation and literally burn from the inside out. Ice mist fruit could neutralize fire toxins from certain fire element demonic cores. It could also suppress dangerously rapid circulation of blood and energy. If a cultivator swallowed one while attempting to enter the Heavenly Circuit Realm, the breakthrough would be much safer. Ice mist fruits were normally very rare. Often, no amount of money could buy one when it was actually needed. For someone like Nguy Tac, who would eventually have to attempt the Heavenly Circuit breakthrough, keeping one fruit was almost ideal. There was another reason the tree was valuable. Ice mist fruit usually grew on cold jade. Wherever there was an ice mist fruit tree, there would almost certainly be cold jade beneath it. A large enough piece of high-quality cold jade could be used not only to refine talismans and magical artifacts, but even to create the body of a magical treasure. Now they only needed to discover how large the cold jade deposit inside the cliff was, and how good its quality might be. Clang! A rusty thick-backed short saber struck the stone beneath the ice mist fruit tree. Several fragments of rock fell away. Diep Tu Chin was doing the digging. The rusty saber had also been found inside the cavern. No one knew which unfortunate cultivator, one of the people the ice silk spiders had turned into stored food, had dropped it. Diep Tu Chin did not use his heavy sword. It would certainly split the rock faster, but one careless strike could also shatter the cold jade and destroy its value. The steel saber itself was completely ordinary, but in Diep Tu Chin's hands, with the great strength art active, it sliced through stone cleanly. Each controlled strike removed a chunk of rock nearly the size of 2 fists. Nguy Tac stared without blinking. For some reason, watching Diep Tu Chin excavate the cliff was even more exciting than hunting a demonic beast. When hunting a beast, whether you managed to kill it or not, at least you knew what kind of beast you were fighting. Here, none of them had the slightest idea how large the cold jade hidden inside the stone might be. There! Suddenly Nguy Tac and Nam Kung Vu Tin both reacted. Diep Tu Chin's next strike exposed a burst of white light and an intense wave of cold energy. Inside the gray rock, a smooth surface of pure white jade appeared. Mid-grade cold jade! Everyone immediately brightened. High-grade cold jade was as transparent as profound ice. The jade in front of them was white, but the color was exceptionally pure, with no obvious discoloration or impurities. The cold energy radiating from it felt like countless ice needles against the skin. Its quality was clearly excellent. This was genuine mid-grade cold jade, suitable for refining talismans, artifacts, and even magical treasures. Now the most important question was simple. How big was it? Diep Tu Chin carefully followed the visible edge of the jade and cut deeper. With each strike, more gleaming white appeared beneath the rock. The exposed section quickly became about 1 foot wide and 2 feet long. Diep Tu Chin continued cutting carefully. Nguy Tac's mouth opened wider and wider. He was almost grinning uncontrollably. Diep Tu Chin kept excavating. Soon, the rock beneath the ice mist fruit tree had been opened across an area nearly 3 feet wide. Everything inside was pure white mid-grade cold jade. They still had not reached the edge. This much jade alone was already worth nearly 100 low-grade spirit stones. The larger it became, the more Nguy Tac felt that Lam Dao Nhat had truly been a wonderful brother. Even Nam Kung Vu Ting was becoming excited, a faint flush appearing on her face. It still doesn't end? 4 feet? 5 feet? Only after the exposed width exceeded 5 feet did they finally reach one side of the jade deposit. After locating the edges on both sides, Diep Tu Chin began carefully digging above the ice mist fruit tree. A short while later, Nguy Tac almost burst out laughing again. The cold jade above the ice mist fruit tree extended more than 2 feet as well. By the time Diep Tiu Chin had completely excavated the piece from the cliff, the entire slab measured roughly 5 feet in both length and width, and was nearly a foot thick. That is the That Zhao Studio. Tu Bao Tower, Kim Ngok Pavilion. In the southern district of Lingyak City, more than a dozen large shops stood together in a bustling marketplace, each known for its own specialty. Among them, the Kim Ngok Pavilion was especially famous for having the most complete and varied selection of materials used in artifact refining. The entrance to the Kim Ngok Pavilion opened into a bright, spacious hall large enough for several dozen people to stand comfortably. Rows of redwood counters filled the interior, displaying all kinds of goods. The cultivators responsible for receiving customers were all young men dressed in brocade robes. Behind the main hall stood a 3-story building. The first and second floors were reserved for honored guests, while the third contained private chambers. Inside one such chamber was an antique table and chair set covered with white fox pelts. Incense burned on a small side table near the wall, filling the room with a subtle fragrance and giving the place an elegant, scholarly atmosphere. Manager Dian of the Kim Ngok Pavilion was a middle-aged scholar dressed in a long green robe. A long beard drifted beneath his chin, giving him an especially refined appearance. A brocade-clad attendant stood respectfully before him, apparently having just delivered a report. Manager Dean's face darkened. He glared at the attendant, who hardly dared breathe. "What? A piece of mid-grade cold jade? You called me downstairs just to look at one piece of mid-grade cold jade? Do you have any idea how many spirit stones the Kim Ngok Pavilion makes in the time it takes you to speak a sentence? And you want the manager himself to come down for something like that? What's wrong with your head?" "No, manager," the young attendant hurriedly explained. "This piece of mid-grade cold jade is rather large. Rather large? Rather large?" Manager Dean grew even angrier and slapped the table. "Is it as big as this table?" The attendant glanced at the table and gave an awkward smile. It seems to be even larger." "What?" Manager Dean's eyes widened. "There is actually a piece of mid-grade cold jade that large." A short while later, in an honored guest room on the first floor of the Kim Ngok Pavilion, Manager Dian stared in astonishment at the enormous slab of white cold jade sitting before Nguy Tac, Nam Kung Vu Tin, and the Diep siblings. It was early summer, yet the guest room felt like an ice cellar. Even their breaths came out as white mist. Manager Dean had seen plenty of mid-grade and high-grade cold jade in his life, but he had truly never seen a piece this large that was also almost completely free of flaws. After studying it carefully and confirming there was no sign of forgery or alteration, his expression became much more serious. He looked at the 4 of them. "Would the 4 of you like our pavilion to cut this cold jade for you, or would you prefer that we place it in an auction on your behalf?" "Put it in an auction?" Nguy Tac froze and looked at Nam Kung Vu Ting and the others. The 4 had already agreed to divide the cold jade equally. But because the slab was so large, they had decided that allowing Diep Tiu Chin to cut it apart himself would probably waste too much material. So they had brought it directly to the Kim Ngok Pavilion. Their original plan had simply been to sell the entire slab. They had not expected Manager Dian to suggest an auction. Everyone knew that rare goods usually fetched higher prices at auctions. Even Nguy Tac knew that items accepted into marketplace auctions were normally considered true treasures. Could this slab of cold jade actually qualify? Something considered a true treasure would normally have to be worth at least 500 or 600 low-grade spirit stones. Yet all 4 of them knew the ordinary market price of mid-grade cold jade. Even a piece as large as a person's thigh might only be worth a few dozen low-grade spirit stones. The 4 exchanged glances. To Nguy Tac's frustration, the painfully honest Diep Tiu Chin immediately asked the question aloud. "Manager Dean, we originally came here to sell this entire piece. But since you said it could be auctioned, does that mean it has already reached the level of a true treasure?" Manager Dean paused. He realized that he had already let the matter slip. If he tried to change his story now, Nguy Tac and the others would certainly distrust him and simply take the jade to another shop for an appraisal. So he nodded and explained. "Cold jade of this size is already extremely rare. More importantly, this slab has only one crack, about 2 feet long, and the crack is not very deep. The rest of the surface is uneven in places, but there are almost no fractures." He stroked his beard. "Sometimes, cold jade appears in pieces even larger than this one, but those pieces are filled with cracks. Much of the material becomes useless. If a slab is covered in small fractures, you may only be able to cut out a few pieces suitable for jade talismans." He gestured toward their slab. "But this piece is different. If you cut directly along the existing crack, there will be almost no waste. And if that crack is carefully ground away, the remaining piece would still be astonishingly large and nearly flawless. It could absolutely be used as the base material for a magical treasure." Manager Dian continued. "If placed at auction, the starting price should be at least 600 low-grade spirit stones. I am not deceiving you. If you urgently need spirit stones, the Kim Ngok Pavilion will buy it immediately for 600 low-grade spirit stones. If you're not in a hurry, we can auction it for you. In about 10 days, the marketplaces around the city will hold a small auction. Even after we deduct a 10% commission, you should still earn more than 600. The choice is yours. A base price of 600 low-grade spirit stones? Thump! Nguy Tac nearly fell straight out of his chair. 600 low-grade spirit stones. How long would it have taken him to earn that much before? Even now, if he refined 30 fireball talismans in a day and ignored the cost of buying fire scorpion blood, he would only earn around 15 low-grade spirit stones. For most ordinary wandering cultivators, 300 or 400 low-grade spirit stones were enough to tempt them into murder and arson. Some might even be willing to go work in Liuha Alley if the price was high enough. Unfortunately, the slab did not belong to Nguy Tac alone. He only had a 1/4 share. If he had known earlier, he would have shamelessly claimed the whole thing. Thinking about it that way, Nguy Tac suddenly understood Lam Dao Nhat a little better. That 5th-level Divine Sea cultivator had probably not decided to betray everyone merely because of the 3 ice silk spiders, and the possessions the 4 of them were carrying. If Lam Dao Nhat had managed to take everything, including this enormous slab of cold jade, he would truly have struck it rich. The total value would have exceeded 1,000 low-grade spirit stones. Who knew? Perhaps with that kind of fortune, Lam Dao Nhat might eventually have become one of the stronger figures on the Tianhuian continent. Instead, he had run into Nguy Tac, who just happened to be carrying a ridiculous pile of fireball talismans with nowhere better to use them. Whether that counted as good luck or terrible luck depended entirely on who was telling the story. What do all of you think? Nguy Tac asked once he recovered, turning toward Deep Tu Chin and Deep Ko Vi. This was unexpected wealth, and since he now had a way to earn spirit stones by refining talismans, he was not in immediate danger of running out of money. Naturally, he could afford to wait. The auction would almost certainly bring a higher price. I'm fine with waiting, Nam Kung Vu Ting said with a shrug. I'm in Lin Yak City anyway. A few more days won't matter. She turned to the siblings. Brother Diep, little sister Diep, what about you? Let Brother Nguy decide, Diep Tu Chin said immediately. We'll follow his judgment. This big guy really is something. Nguy Tac liked him even more. He nodded and turned to Manager Dian. Then we'll leave the cold jade with the Kim Ngok Pavilion and have you auction it. Please wait a moment. Manager Dian gave a few instructions to the brocade-clad attendant behind him. He looked extremely pleased with the outcome. The Kim Ngok Pavilion's greatest strength was its artifact refining materials. If such an enormous piece of cold jade was sold through their hands, it would quietly enhance the pavilion's reputation. For merchants like them, that kind of reputation was worth more than a few extra spirit stones. The attendant hurried away. A short while later, he returned carrying a red wooden tray. Nguy Tac happened to be holding a cup of tea. The moment he saw what was on the tray, he almost swallowed the cup. Spirit stones. Neatly arranged on the red tray were 60 spirit stones. All 60 were mid-grade spirit stones, each glowing with a soft yellow light. What is this? Deep Tu Chin asked in confusion. The Kim Ngok Pavilion has survived and prospered in Ling Yak City because we value trust, Manager Dean said proudly. According to our rules, since the guaranteed base price is 600 low-grade spirit stones, even if the cold jade somehow fails to sell at auction, our pavilion will still buy it for that amount. He gestured to the tray. So we will advance the guaranteed payment now. If the jade sells for more, the remaining spirit stones will be paid after the auction ends. The Kim Ngok Pavilion really knows how to do business. Nguy Tac immediately understood the logic. This was essentially the same as participating in the auction, except the sellers received the guaranteed money in advance. Naturally, people would prefer doing business with a merchant that treated customers this way. No wonder the Kim Ngok Pavilion had grown so large. Nguy Tac's eyes then drifted back to the tray. Besides the irresistible spirit stones, there was also a red jade token engraved with the character 4 and decorated with an exquisitely carved evergreen pattern. What's this? Nguy Tac decided that no matter how hard he tried to act sophisticated, he was still a country bumpkin. So he simply asked without shame, "That is your entry token for the auction," Manager Dian patiently explained. The mark means that 4 people may enter with it. You may attend and see for yourselves how much your consigned item sells for, and you will not need to pay an entrance fee. Of course, once inside, you may also bid on other items. He pointed at the token. However, these jade tokens are not easy to make. Please keep it safe and return it after the auction. If it is lost, you will have to compensate us with 10 low-grade spirit stones. The auction date will be announced in several places throughout Ling Yak City. As long as you pay a little attention, you'll know when it begins. The Kim Ngok Pavilion truly is far better than ordinary merchants. Nguy Tac knew that entering an auction normally required at least one low-grade spirit stone as a fee. Now that he could attend for free, he became even happier and immediately began flattering Manager Dean. Not at all, not at all. Manager Dean smiled pleasantly and stroked his beard. We only hope that if you obtain other valuable items in the future, you'll consider bringing them to the Kim Nok Pavilion. We will never let our customers suffer a loss. Both sides were satisfied. After exchanging a few polite words, Nguy Tac, Nam Kung Vu Tin, Diep Tu Chin and Diep Ko Vi left the Kim Nok Pavilion. 15 beautiful mid-grade spirit stones went straight into Nguy Tac's pouch. Diep Tu Chin and Diep Ko Vi needed to hurry back to Lac Nyet City, so Nguy Tac and Nam Kung Vu Tin accompanied them to the teleportation formation operated by the Thien Nyat sect in southern Lin Yak City. Brother Nyi, Diep Tu Chin said emotionally, "There aren't many people like you these days. This is a friendship I, Diep Tu Chin, will definitely treasure. If you ever have time to visit Lac Nyet City, you must come find me. Brother Diep, you should come to Lin Yak City often too." Nguy Tac replied with equal emotion. "Once you're gone, little brother will miss you terribly." It was an incredibly touching farewell. If the old man in green had known Nguy Tac even a little, he would have racked his brains trying to understand the scene. With Nguy Tac's personality, the man should have been desperate to rush home and count the spirit stones he had just earned. Why was he acting as though he and Diep Tu Chin, whom he had known for barely a day, were brothers who had spent 10 years fighting side by side? But if the old man in green had seen what happened next, his vision would probably have gone black. He would instantly have understood why Nguy Tac was being so enthusiastic. Nguy Tac gripped Diep Tu Chin's hand. The more they spoke, the more emotional he became. Then the two men even embraced once, and immediately afterward, with tears of brotherly affection practically filling his eyes, Nguy Tac very naturally turned and hugged Diep Ko Vi as well. After all, they were brother and sister who had faced life and death together with him. They had been tested by danger. How could he possibly discriminate between them? Taking advantage of a young lady like that must have felt pretty good, huh? Diep Tu Chin and Diep Ko Vi disappeared into the glow of the teleportation formation. Outside the Thien Nyat sect hall that housed the formation, Nam Kung Vu Ting suddenly smiled at Nguy Tac. "Huh? What are you talking about?" Her expression made his face heat slightly, but he immediately pretended to know nothing. "Join Thiet Sac." Nam Kung Vu Ting smiled and suddenly made the offer. "Join Thiet Sac?" Nguy Tac stared at her. "If I recommend you, there definitely won't be a problem," she said. Thiet Sac is only an organization of wandering cultivators. It doesn't impose nearly as many restrictions as a sect. But once you join, you'll have Thiet Sac's protection, along with many other benefits. In Nam Kung Vu Ting's mind, there was no reason Nguy Tac would refuse. Most wandering cultivators in Lin Yak City dreamed of joining Thiet Sac. To her surprise, he immediately shook his head. "No, thank you. I appreciate the offer, but I think I prefer being as free as I am now." What kind of person is he, really? Nam Kung Vu Tin watched Nguy Tac's back as he walked away. She remembered the way he had secretly stared through the tear in her armor earlier, apparently thinking she had not noticed. A bitter smile appeared on her face, followed by a faint blush. After a moment, she looked down at the red jade token marked with the character 4. A captivating smile slowly appeared at the corner of her lips. "Nguy Tac? Sooner or later, I'm going to figure you out." Wahahaha! A shameless laugh that could make someone's skin crawl rang through an utterly ordinary little stone house in western Lingj Nok City. Nguy Tac was staring at the pile of spirit stones on his bed, his eyes glowing. Before going to the Kim Nok Pavilion, the group had sold the 3 ice silk spiders, 2 gray rock snakes, and the collected spider silk for a total of 210 low-grade spirit stones. Diep Tu Chin had taken only 60 low-grade spirit stones, roughly the value of 1 ice silk spider. 40 low-grade spirit stones had gone to Nam Kung Vu Tin. The remaining 110 had been stuffed into one of Lam Dao Nhat's leather pouches and handed to Nguy Tac. On top of that, the 13 low-grade spirit stones, and 3 mid-grade spirit stones taken from Lam Dao Nhat, and the unfortunate cultivators who had become food for the ice silk spiders had, naturally, gone straight inside Nguy Tac's robe. Then there were the 15 mid-grade spirit stones he had received from the Kim Nok Pavilion. Altogether, there were now 18 mid-grade spirit stones and 128 low-grade spirit stones spread across his bed. The sight was so intoxicating that Nguy Tac had not even bothered selling the miscellaneous items taken from Lam Dao Nhat and the other unlucky cultivators. He had simply rushed home, desperate to see what all those spirit stones looked like piled together. It was not yet night, so the old man in green was still inside the ghost-nurturing jar. The small stone house was quiet and cold, lit only by the glow of spirit stones. Nguy Tac was already used to the green light of low-grade spirit stones. But the pale golden glow of mid-grade spirit stones was something different. He had seen them before, but he had never actually held one in his own hand. First things first, I'm using a mid-grade spirit stone. Might as well enjoy myself. A mid-grade spirit stone held 10 times the spiritual energy of a low-grade one. With Nguy Tac's current cultivation at the 3rd level of the Divine Sea realm, he could not refine an entire mid-grade spirit stone in a single day. The novelty alone made him reluctant to put the pale golden stone down. After admiring it for a while, he finally sat down, closed his eyes and began cultivating. Several hours passed. Nguy Tac remained completely still. Threads of pale golden spiritual energy continuously flowed out from the mid-grade spirit stone, entered the meridians in his hand, and gradually spread throughout his body. Inside him, the movement of true essence produced a soft, rhythmic sound like flowing water. Purple light shimmered at the crown of his head, his chest, and the dantian in his lower abdomen. As more spiritual energy entered his body, all 3 masses of light slowly expanded. These 3 whirlpool-like pools of purple radiance were the 3 divine seas formed through his cultivation of the purple mystic true art. Once they reached a sufficient level, Nguy Tac could use the true essence accumulated in those 3 divine seas to open a 4th. But at present, the 3 divine seas were not yet surging strongly enough. He still needed more time before he could break through to the 4th level of the Divine Sea realm. Ah, that feels good! Without realizing it, evening had already fallen. Nguy Tac suddenly opened his eyes and stretched his body. A mid-grade spirit stone really is a mid-grade spirit stone. It lasts longer and gives you far more spiritual energy. The stone in his hand had only lost about half of its pale golden color. It looked as though it could support several more hours of cultivation. Nguy Tac glanced outside and saw that the sky had grown completely dark. With a grin, he reached under the bed, pulled out the ghost nurturing jar, and slapped it a few times. Lazy old ghost, stop sleeping. Come out and look at my spirit stones. What are you shouting about? After being smacked around by Nguy Tac, the old man in green floated out of the jar. Then his eyes nearly popped out of his head. Where did you get this many spirit stones? He was no longer as ignorant of spirit stones as he had been when Nguy Tac first freed him from the damaged ghost nurturing jar. By now he understood exactly what they were worth. There was an entire pile on the bed, including more than a dozen mid-grade spirit stones. Altogether, they were worth well over 300 low-grade spirit stones. I killed someone and took his stuff. Nguy Tac laughed proudly. I used fireball talismans to kill a 5th-level Divine Sea cultivator. Got quite a few good things from him. You killed someone for his possessions? How dare you do something so reckless? The old man in green immediately became agitated. Do you even know what kind of background that man had? The fewer powerful cultivators you rob and kill, the better. You never know who might be standing behind them. He began lecturing at full speed. Do you know how Nam Tien Ba, the golden core wandering cultivator who dominated an entire region 20,000 years ago, died? One time, he was poisoned by a demonic beast and his mouth swelled up. A 2nd-level Divine Sea cultivator laughed at him. Nam Tien Ba became furious and killed the man. Who would have expected that insignificant 2nd-level cultivator to have an ancestral connection stretching back dozens of generations to a mighty divine mystic cultivator? That great cultivator eventually killed Nam Tien Ba. And you're only at the 3rd level of the Divine Sea realm, yet you're already killing people and stealing their belongings? The old man in green grew more animated the longer he spoke. If he had still possessed a physical body and enough saliva, he probably could have drowned Nguy Tac with it. Nguy Tac merely chuckled. Old man, don't worry. He was just an ordinary wandering cultivator. And even if there were consequences, there are bigger organizations ahead of me to take the blame. He shrugged. Besides, if I hadn't killed him and taken his things, he would have killed me and taken mine. What actually happened? The old man in green paused. Well, it went like this. Nguy Tac told him the entire story. How he had agreed to join Lam Dao Nhat in hunting ice silk spiders for spirit stones. How Lam Dao Nhat had tried to take everything for himself. How Nguy Tac had killed him with fireball talismans. And how they had later discovered an enormous piece of mid-grade cold jade. You really are pig-brained! Nguy Tac had expected the old man to praise his intelligence and quick thinking. Instead, he was immediately scolded again. With your cultivation, you actually dared go hunting demonic beasts with people you barely knew? At least 2 of my former masters were killed because they joined strangers on demonic beast hunts. If you don't want to become the 3rd, then never make the same mistake they did. Fine, Nguy Tac said, rubbing his nose. From now on, I'll only go with people who definitely can't kill me. That will do. Seeing that Nguy Tac was willing to listen, the old man's expression softened. Remember this. Many cultivators who reached high realms and lived long lives didn't survive because their cultivation arts were superior, or because they came from magnificent sects. They survived because they were more cautious than everyone else. The old man in green then looked toward the pile of miscellaneous items beside the spirit stones. Those were the things Nguy Tac had taken from Lam Dao Nhat and the low-level cultivators who had become food for the ice silk spiders. Useful items such as the Qi recovery pills, ice mist fruit, and Windlord treasure talisman were going to be kept. The rest would eventually be sold for spirit stones. Nguy Tac simply had not gotten around to dealing with them yet. This is? The old man's expression changed the moment his eyes swept over the pile. Oh, that's an ice mist fruit, Nguy Tac said. It grew above that cold jade deposit. He assumed that was what the old man was reacting to. Bring me that white jade box. The old man did not even look at the ice mist fruit. His eyes remained fixed on the completely unmarked white jade box. What, old man, don't tell me this isn't an ordinary jade box. Nguy Tac was not stupid. The old man's expression was enough to tell him something was unusual. He quickly held out the box for inspection. The old man in green examined it extremely carefully. Then he suddenly said, "Go outside, break off any stalk of silver candlegrass, and put it inside." Just break off some silver candlegrass and put it in? Nguy Tac had no idea what the old man was planning, but he followed the instruction anyway. After placing the grass inside, he asked, "What are you trying to test?" "I suspect this is a spirit-preserving jade box." "A spirit-preserving jade box? What's that?" "A treasure that prevents harvested spiritual herbs from losing their medicinal properties and spiritual energy. Its effect mainly comes from the nourishing origin jade used to make the box." Nguy Tac immediately lost some enthusiasm. "Damn, I thought it was some incredibly powerful magical treasure. So it basically just keeps things fresh? You truly are ignorant." The old man in green looked at him with pure contempt. "I don't even want to talk to you. Do you know that there are spiritual medicines and demonic cores whose spiritual energy begins dissipating the moment the herb is harvested or the beast is killed? Normally, an object like this may not seem valuable, but when you actually obtain one of those medicines or demonic cores, if you don't have a box like this, or some other treasure capable of preventing the spiritual energy from dispersing, you'll be forced to stand there and watch it lose all its value until it turns into useless dust. Then you can cry as much as you like. These objects are rare. When you truly need one, you may not be able to buy it no matter how many spirit stones you have, because any cultivator with a little knowledge keeps one for personal use." When you put it that way, it does sound useful. Nguy Tac thought about it and realized the old man had a point. He chuckled, then pushed two other items toward him. "Speaking of knowledge, you reminded me of something. Take a look at these. Do you know what this is? And do you know how to remove the restriction on these jade slips?" The two items were the map fragment taken from Lam Dao Nhat and the green jade spell slips sold by the Tianko Pavilion. Lam Dao Nhat had carefully stored the map fragment, which meant it was unlikely to be worthless. The writing on it was entirely in ancient script. Nguy Tac figured someone as ancient as the old man in green might recognize it. "Amphong Mountain, Dao Tu Lake." Sure enough, the old man needed only one glance to read several of the place names. This is a map of the Thonthon ruins. He quickly reached a conclusion. "The Thonthon ruins?" Nguy Tac asked curiously. "Where is that?" "The Thonthon ruins are the remains of a powerful ancient sect," the old man explained. "Many refining materials and magical treasures left behind by ancient cultivators can still be found there. Over the last several tens of thousands of years, countless cultivators have entered in search of treasure. However, the Thonthon ruins lie in the demonic beast wilderness between the Thian Huyen continent and the Van Linge continent. Many demonic beasts roam the area, and there are countless ancient restrictions whose dangers are difficult to predict. 9 out of 10 cultivators who risk entering die inside." He gave a dry laugh. "Even if there were no treasures left by the ancient sect itself, the possessions carried by all the cultivators who died there over the years would already make those 1,000 miles of ruins rich with valuable objects." He pointed at the fragment. This was probably drawn by a cultivator who once entered the Thonthon ruins. It records which areas are occupied by certain demonic beasts and which routes are relatively safe. If you had the complete map, exploring the ruins would be somewhat safer. Unfortunately, you only have one corner of it. And with your current cultivation, even if you possess the entire map, going to the Thonthon ruins would still be the same as throwing your life away. "The ruins of a great ancient sect?" Nguy Tac's eyes immediately lit up. "I'll definitely go take a look someday. Maybe I'll get lucky and find the other map fragments too." Nothing else mattered. Anyone capable of traveling that far beyond the Heaven's Dome had to be many times stronger than Lam Dao Nhat. Lam Dao Nhat alone had carried this many good things. Just imagining what those dead experts might have left behind was enough to make Nguy Tac's eyes shine. "Keep dreaming for now." The old man looked at him with contempt. Every time Nguy Tac heard the words valuable treasure, his eyes became brighter than spirit stones. "Hand me those 2 jade slips." Normally, whenever the old man asked him to do something, Nguy Tac would hesitate or argue first. This time his hands moved like lightning. The 2 green jade slips were immediately placed in front of the old man. The old man stared at them for a while. Then his eyes suddenly transformed into 2 streams of green flame. The flames seeped into one of the jade slips. Damn, what's happening now? The instant the green flame entered, black light suddenly erupted from the jade slip. Looking closely, Nguy Tac saw the light take the shape of a vicious black wolf. The wolf lunged straight at the green flame formed by the old man. The green flame transformed into a green skull. It wrapped itself around the black wolf. The wolf tore at the skull with its jaws, while the skull opened its own mouth and bit viciously back. Damn! After a while, the green flame suddenly burst out of the jade slip. With a shout, it reformed into the old man in green. He looked thoroughly disheveled and was panting hard. Huh? What was that, black wolf? Nguy Tac asked in surprise. Old man, don't tell me you lost. Bah, it's only a fragment of a black wind wolf's soul sealed into the restriction. The old man panted for a while, then glared fiercely at the jade slip. A tiny soul fragment like that? I refuse to believe I can't crush it. He transformed into green flame again and rushed back into the jade slip. The black wolf and green skull began tearing each other apart once more. Damn it. I refuse to believe I can't beat you. A short while later, the old man staggered back out again, rested briefly, then charged in once more. Damn it, again. Not long afterward, he was forced out in an even more miserable state. I refuse to accept this. Nguy Tac, give me some fire scorpion blood. Watch me destroy that thing. Nguy Tac stared speechlessly as the old man charged in and out of the jade slip, like an army repeatedly storming a fortified city. This happened 17 or 18 times in succession. After drinking some fire scorpion blood, the old man's strength finally recovered. The black wind wolf inside the jade slip gradually became dimmer and dimmer. At last, the green skull completely tore it apart. Ha ha ha, piece of trash. In the old days, I could have crushed you with one finger. You actually dared bite me. The old man in green laughed with outrageous pride. So the restriction is broken? Nguy Tac watched as the black light completely disappeared from the green jade slip. He cautiously poured true essence into it. Sure enough, the unique emblem of the Thian Co Pavilion no longer released its protective green glow. As Nguy Tac's purple true essence entered the slip, images and words describing a spell slowly appeared inside. Good stuff! Brother Lam Dao Nhat really was a wonderful person. Nguy Tac grinned from ear to ear. The technique recorded in the jade slip was a lightning element spell, called the Golden Serpent Lightning Art. A low-level spell like his Azure Waterblade had only one method of attack. No matter how high the cultivator's true essence cultivation became, the spell would always create the same shining blue water blade. Only its speed and power would increase. The Golden Serpent Lightning Art was completely different. It contained several distinct forms of attack. The technique had 5 stages. At the first stage, even a second-level Divine Sea cultivator could practice it. Once mastered, it produced a bolt of lightning roughly 2 feet long, shaped somewhat like a serpent. The second stage could be cultivated at the 3rd level of the Divine Sea realm. Once mastered, 10 golden lightning serpents would twist together into the shape of a long fork or trident. The 3rd stage required cultivation at the 4th level of the Divine Sea realm. 20 serpent-shaped bolts would gather into a lightning sphere. When it struck an enemy or defensive barrier, the sphere would explode across an area roughly 10 feet wide. The 4th stage required the 5th level of the Divine Sea realm. It produced a web made from 50 serpent-like lightning bolts that could cover an area nearly 50 feet across. The final stage was called the Dance of 100 Golden Serpents. Only cultivators at the 1st level of the Heavenly Circuit realm or above could practice it. Once released, more than 100 serpent-shaped lightning bolts would rain down across an area almost 100 feet wide. Nguy Tac had always lacked both cultivation arts and useful spells. This Golden Serpent Lightning Art was clearly the very lightning technique Lam Dao Nhat had used against them in the cavern. Nguy Tac had seen its effects clearly. Not only was the spell powerful, the golden lightning also numbed the opponent. Even Diep Tiu Chin, who practiced the golden armor art, had been left unable to move for quite a while after being struck by Lam Dao Nhat's lightning sphere. If an ordinary cultivator like Nguy Tac were hit, even if he somehow blocked most of the destructive force, he would probably end up twitching on the ground like a man having a seizure. The power of his Azure Waterblade was acceptable, but against fast demonic beasts, actually landing a hit was difficult. During the battle in the cavern, he had seen how Nam Kung Vu Ting's Ice Shield art and Lam Dao Nhat's lightning technique could slow or restrict an enemy. Since then, he had badly wanted a spell with a similar effect. Now he had one. Lam Dao Nhat had been at the 5th level of the Divine Sea realm. Yet during their fight, he had only managed to use the 3rd stage lightning sphere. That meant he probably had not possessed the Golden Serpent Lightning Art for very long. He had not even had time to master the 4th stage Golden Serpent Net. With Nguy Tac's current cultivation, however, he could at least practice the second stage Golden Serpent Lightning Fork. After happily memorizing the technique, Nguy Tac glanced at the old man in green, who was still laughing proudly. "Old man, you only defeated one little black wind wolf. I bet you can't do anything about the one in the other jade slip." "Fart! I could beat 10 more of them!" the old man immediately shouted. He transformed into green flame and charged into the second jade slip. "Tai at aura reading art!" By the time the old man in green finally emerged again, he looked almost as exhausted as Nguy Tac had been after his earliest attempts at talisman refining. He had clearly consumed a large amount of his remaining vital energy. He would probably need 10 days to half a month of rest, along with daily doses of fire scorpion blood to recover. Nguy Tac, however, was once again deeply impressed by the technique inside the second jade slip. The aura reading art could be learned by any cultivator at the second level of the Divine Sea realm or above. Once activated, it allowed the user to roughly judge the cultivation realm and quality of the cultivation art practiced by someone up to 2 levels stronger than himself. Nguy Tac had originally hoped this jade slip would contain Lam Dao Nhat's highly effective defensive spell, the White Water Barrier. He had never learned a defensive spell. Until now, he had relied entirely on defensive talismans and artifacts. His Earth Shield Treasure Talisman had already been used for the last time and was now useless. The defensive artifact still on him consisted only of the Spirit Heaven Jade Pendant, which could be used twice more, and Lam Dao Nhat's Windlord Treasure Talisman, which had 5 activations remaining. Those defensive talismans were consumable. Once they were exhausted, Nguy Tac would be in serious danger if he still had no defensive spell of his own. Unexpectedly, Lam Dao Nhat's second green jade spell slip contained something completely different: the Tai at aura reading art. It was not a defensive technique, nor could it compare to the most advanced aura reading arts on the Xianxia continent. But for Nguy Tac, it was still extremely useful. If he activated the technique and could not see through someone's cultivation at all, then that person had to be more than 1 or 2 levels stronger than him. At that point, Nguy Tac would know to avoid provoking them. Possessing this technique was, in its own way, another life-saving measure. At present, Nguy Tac was not short of spirit stones for cultivation. For a cultivator, one's realm and the quality of one's techniques were the true foundation. Those mattered most. As for the white jade box suspected to be a spirit-preserving jade box, there was no need to decide anything yet. He could wait until the next day and see whether the silver candle grass inside remained perfectly fresh. So Nguy Tac sorted the miscellaneous objects on his bed and began practicing his 2 new spells. Second level of the Divine Sea realm. Heh, looks like he's only practicing a yellow-grade cultivation art. Third level of the Divine Sea realm, same as me. Damn though, his cultivation art looks a little better. Damn, that one must be a heavenly circuit cultivator. 5 nights later, Nguy Tac walked toward the northern market district of Linyak City. As he walked, his eyes darted suspiciously toward every cultivator who passed him. Each time he looked at someone, an almost invisible trace of spiritual light flashed across his eyes. The Golden Serpent Lightning Art had proven fairly difficult to learn. After 5 days of practice, Nguy Tac had only just mastered the first stage, and could barely release 3 serpent-shaped lightning bolts about 2 feet long. The aura reading art, on the other hand, was much simpler. He could already use it quite smoothly. It also consumed very little true essence, which meant he could casually inspect one passerby after another. When the technique was active, he could faintly see the radiance of the divine seas inside another cultivator's body. By judging the brightness and intensity of that radiance, he could roughly estimate how the person's cultivation compared with his own. But the technique could not see through anyone more than 2 levels stronger. One cultivator who had just passed by was at least in the heavenly circuit realm. When Nguy Tac tried to examine him, all he could see was a sensation of the man's entire body being wrapped in flowing, flame-like radiance. It felt overwhelmingly powerful. Nguy Tac's purple mystic true art was the same as most true essence cultivation arts in one respect. The higher the realm, the harder each advancement became. Previously, Nguy Tac had never possessed enough spirit stones. Now he did. Naturally, he had cultivated like a madman for the last 5 days. He had already consumed the equivalent of 40 low-grade spirit stones. Even so, his 3 divine seas had only grown slightly larger. By his estimate, he would need at least another 10 days before he could break through to the 4th level of the divine sea realm. And that was only because the purple mystic true art was relatively low-grade, and because he currently had enough spirit stones to cultivate continuously. If he practiced a higher-grade true essence art, then even with unlimited spirit stones, advancing from the 3rd to the 4th level of the divine sea realm might take dozens or even hundreds of days. In most major sects, such as the Lam Dao Nhat sect, ordinary disciples did not receive 8 low-grade spirit stones every day. Only talented core disciples could afford that kind of cultivation. For most disciples, advancement took several times longer. That was exactly why Nguy Tac had spent so many years stuck at the second level of the Divine Sea realm and only managed to advance after refining his first batch of fireball talismans. He had come to the northern market today for another reason. When he broke through to the third level of the Divine Sea realm, he had realized that refining talismans also trained his spiritual awareness. And more importantly, fireball talismans were his most reliable source of income. Now that he had enough capital, he planned to ask several shops in the northern market to post a long-term purchase notice for fire scorpions. His offered price was 1 low-grade spirit stone for 4 fresh fire scorpion corpses. To other cultivators, that price was absurdly generous, but a single fire scorpion provided enough material for 4 fireball talismans. 4 scorpions, at Nguy Tac's current success rate, could produce at least 10 usable talismans. In other words, he could spend 1 low-grade spirit stone in materials and create roughly 6 low-grade spirit stones worth of finished talismans. The profit was outrageous. Because his purchase order was permanent, quite a few low-level cultivators had begun specifically hunting fire scorpions, creatures no one had previously cared about. For the past 5 days, Nguy Tac had come once each day to collect them. On the first day, he received 12. After that, the daily average rose to 16 or 17. During those 5 days, Nguy Tac had focused entirely on cultivating the purple mystic true art and practicing his 2 new spells. He had extracted the fire scorpion blood, but had not refined a single fireball talisman. His plan was to first master the second stage of the Golden Serpent Lightning Art. After that, he would divide each day between cultivation and fireball talisman refinement. Once he had accumulated a sufficient stock of talismans, and his spirit stone reserves began running low again, he would accept relatively safe missions from the marketplaces to earn additional income. With his current cultivation and that many fireball talismans, hunting second-tier demonic beasts or anything below the middle ranks of the third tier would not be much of a problem. An auction. While casually using the aura reading art, Nguy Tac reached the entrance to the northern market. A crowd had gathered around the stone wall where public notices were posted. He walked closer and immediately paused. The most important announcement stated that 3 days from now, the Kim Nok Pavilion would host a small auction. Manager Dean had told them the auction would take place within 10 days. Apparently, it had been moved forward by 2 days. 3 days from now, Nguy Tac considered it. I'll see how much that cold jade sells for, and while I'm there, I can look for a decent defensive spell. After reading the notice, his thoughts somehow drifted toward the long-legged, dangerously attractive Nam Kung Vu Tin. Especially the smooth, pale curve he had seen through the tear in her soft armor. Early morning mist drifted over Linjnyak City. White cranes and long-tailed vermilion birds used by various sects to deliver messages glided repeatedly across the sky. Their silhouettes passing through the pale mist made the city look even more like a place from an immortal painting. Inside Nguy Tac's small stone house in the western district, his hands formed a spell seal. 10 serpent-like bolts of lightning flashed into existence. Crackling sharply, they twisted around one another and condensed into a pointed lightning fork nearly 2 feet long. Nguy Tac swept his right hand forward. The lightning fork struck a nearby corner of the stone wall. Crack! Dazzling sparks exploded across the surface. When the light faded, a crater nearly a foot wide had been blasted into the hard stone. Nguy Tac examined the damage and smiled with enormous satisfaction. Then he stuffed 2 black leather pouches into his robe and headed toward the Kim Nok Pavilion in the southern district. Today was the day of the auction. If their mid-grade cold jade sold for a good price, he would receive another windfall. Over the last 3 days, he had continued practicing the Golden Serpent Lightning Art. At last, he had successfully mastered the Golden Serpent Lightning Fork. The jade token that granted free entry to the auction was being kept by Nam Kung Vu Ting. So, as they had agreed, Nguy Tac went to wait for her outside the auction venue. The auction itself would be held in the Lang Tu Pavilion beside the Kim Nok Pavilion. The building had been constructed jointly by more than a dozen major merchants in the surrounding district, and was used specifically as auctions. Its outer walls were built from enormous blocks of white stone engraved with intricate patterns. 4 upturned roof corners curved toward the sky, making the entire structure appear as though it were about to rise into the clouds. Nguy Tac arrived when there was still half an hour before the official beginning of the auction. Even so, every shop along the surrounding streets was already packed with people. He used the aura reading art to scan the crowd. There were 7 or 8 cultivators at the first level of the Heavenly Circuit realm or above. Just looking at them made the hair on the back of his neck rise. In truth, many of the cultivators gathered outside the Lang Tu Pavilion had no intention of entering the auction. They were simply taking advantage of the crowd to turn the surrounding streets into an open trading market. Damn, that's a terrible fake black wind condor. Nguy Tac had been waiting near the Kim Nok pavilion for only a short while when 5 or 6 people approached him, trying to sell things. One of them even tried to sell him an ordinary white condor with black stripes painted across its feathers. Nguy Tac did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Where is that beauty? Don't tell me she's standing me up." After waiting a little longer, he began muttering to himself. "Nguy Tac." At that exact moment, a sweet voice called his name from behind. "Nam Kung Vu Ting?" Damn, Nguy Tac turned around. Nam Kung Vu Ting stood not far away, smiling at him. The moment he saw her clearly, he froze. Today, she was not wearing the tight red soft armor from before. Instead, she wore an elegant white cultivation robe. The refined garment made the full curves of her chest stand out like twin snow-covered peaks rising from a wild mountain range. The robe followed one of the most fashionable styles among female cultivators on the Thian Huyen continent. The neckline dipped slightly on both sides, revealing a smooth line of pale skin. A necklace set with a green gemstone hung down into that opening, making her complexion appear even whiter. The long white robe narrowed perfectly at Nam Kung Vu Ting's waist before flowing all the way to the ground, trailing slightly behind her like the tail of a fish. If the Nam Kung Vu Ting, who wore tight red soft armor, had looked like an astonishingly beautiful warrior, then the woman standing before Nguy Tac now looked like a mermaid who had stepped out of a painting. Nguy Tac was not the only one staring. Nearly every cultivator nearby had gone wide-eyed. Quite a few men probably wished they could transform into the green gem necklace hanging against her chest. Nguy Tac's vacant stare made a faint blush rise to Nam Kung Vu Ting's cheeks, but she also looked a little surprised. Nguy Tac had cut away the scorched mess of hair left from his earlier accident. His hair had now grown back to about an inch in length. Without the burned, wild hairstyle, his features looked much cleaner and more refined. He could, at least barely, be considered handsome. "What? Don't recognize me?" Seeing him, frozen in place, Nam Kung Vu Ting raised a hand and brushed back her hair. The simple motion made her look even more feminine and instantly attracted countless heated gazes. "Who is that beauty?" A number of young cultivators nearby were clearly tempted. Several of them had respectable cultivation and were already considering walking over to introduce themselves. "You've got to be kidding." Then they watched in disbelief as this stunning woman of unknown background casually began walking beside an utterly ordinary-looking low-level wandering cultivator. The two clearly knew each other. "Well, you've changed quite a bit. I didn't recognize you at first." Nguy Tac laughed awkwardly to cover his daze. At the same time, the envious looks around him felt incredibly satisfying. Some of the cultivators glaring at him had higher cultivation than he did. So what? None of them had a beauty like Nam Kung Vu Ting standing beside them. "You've changed a lot too," Nam Kung Vu Ting said with a smile, lightly adjusting the hem of her robe. "Your hair isn't nearly as distinctive as before." Then she asked, "Have you seen Deep Tu Chin or Deep Ko Vi?" "No." Nguy Tac shook his head. "They said last time that they weren't sure they could come. If they still haven't appeared by now, they probably won't. Then should we go inside? At least there will be somewhere quiet to talk." Nam Kung Vu Ting smiled. "I want to speak with you privately." "Privately?" Nguy Tac immediately felt there was something slightly suggestive about her smile. His imagination began running wild. "Don't tell me this beauty fell in love with me at first sight and has decided to offer herself to me? Let's go." Seeing that he had no objection, Nam Kung Vu Ting smiled again. The morning sunlight fell across her long hair, giving it a faint golden sheen. The subtle fragrance unique to a young woman drifted toward Nguy Tac and made his entire body feel slightly numb. "Nam Kung Vu Ting." At that moment, a clear, resonant voice called from nearby. Nguy Tac turned toward the sound. A handsome young man was walking toward them with a smile. He looked about the same age as Nguy Tac. His dark hair was tied behind his head with a golden ring, and he wore a pale gray cultivation robe. Golden threads ran through the robe, holding several light blue crystals in place. The elegant clothing made the young man's sword-like brows and bright eyes seem even more distinguished. Judging from the wind element's spiritual fluctuations coming from the crystals and runes woven into the robe, those gems were not merely decoration. They clearly had some special function. A 5th-level Divine Sea Cultivator. Nguy Tac quietly activated the aura reading art. 5 divine seas shone within the handsome young man's body. All 5 were surging vigorously. The cultivation art he practiced was clearly far superior to Nguy Tac's purple mystic true art. At the very least, this young man had an extraordinary background. What immediately annoyed Nguy Tac, however, was that although the man approached with a polite smile, he practically did not look at Nguy Tac at all. His eyes remained fixed on Nam Kung Vu Ting. "Li Hong Lan?" Nam Kung Vu Ting's brows drew together slightly as the young man's name left her red lips. "The last time I saw you wearing that red soft armor, I already thought you looked like an immortal descended from heaven, Li Honglan said with a smile. I never expected you to look even more beautiful in a robe like this, he continued smoothly. I suspect you'll overshadow every other female cultivator at today's auction. Only then did Li Honglan finally glance at Nguy Tac beside her. Inwardly, he clearly looked down on this apparently poor wandering cultivator. But his expression remained calm and effortless, carrying just a hint of amusement. It was the relaxed demeanor of someone used to standing above others. How could an ordinary wandering cultivator compare? Young Master Lai, stop teasing me. Nam Kung Vu Ting smiled faintly. What brings someone like you to a small auction like this? You're attending it yourself, Lai Honglan replied. If an auction is interesting enough for you, why shouldn't it interest me? He smiled. Manager Dean of the Kim Nok Pavilion sent word that although today's auction is not especially large, there will be several very good items. As he spoke, Nguy Tac noticed that Lai Honglan was idly playing with two black gold demonic cores, each about the size of a pigeon's egg. Their surfaces glittered with tiny golden specks. Nguy Tac recognized them. They were the demonic cores of third-tier upper-rank blazing golden vultures. These cores could not be directly combined with spiritual herbs to refine pills filled with spiritual energy. However, when held in the hand, they continuously released a special energy into the body. It was said that this energy could gradually strengthen a cultivator's physical constitution. Each core was worth around 60 low-grade spirit stones. Ordinary cultivators did not casually play with 120 low-grade spirit stones in their hands. Nguy Tac's irritation grew. Li Honglan was treating him like empty air, and although the man had not directly announced his identity, his earlier words had practically done so. Manager Dean of the Kim Nok Pavilion only personally sent advance information to a handful of major powers in Lynch Neok City. The unspoken message was obvious. Who the hell are you? Nam Kung Vu Ting and I are talking. Why haven't you taken the hint and disappeared? Nguy Tac had never been the kind of person who fawned over powerful factions. Now that he had the old man in green, he felt even less reason to bow his head to anyone. This Li Honglan had appeared from nowhere and had no connection to him. Why should Nguy Tac politely leave just to make the man happy? So he deliberately acted bored and gave a long yawn. Is this a friend of yours? As expected, Li Honglan could no longer pretend Nguy Tac did not exist. But after only a brief glance, he said something that nearly made Nguy Tac explode. Does he also wish to enter the auction? If so, I have an honored guest seat. I can take him inside with me. The way Li Honglan said it made it sound as though Nguy Tac were some miserable pauper who could not even afford the entrance fee. That won't be necessary. Before Nguy Tac could answer, Nam Kung Vu Tin looked at Li Honglan, then turned and smiled at Nguy Tac. He has an honored guest seat as well. I was planning to enter with him. Li Honglan paused. Haha, keep showing off now! Nguy Tac wore a perfect serious smile. Inside, however, he was practically blooming with joy. Even every pore on his body felt comfortable. At that moment, Nam Kung Vu Ting seemed unbelievably adorable. For this one act alone, if she demanded that Nguy Tac repay her with his body 18 times, he was certain he would not refuse. Oh, Li Honglan looked at him again. May I ask this brother's honored name? Is he also a member of Thiet Sach? His name is Nguy Tac, Nam Kung Vu Tin replied with a smile as bright as a flower. I invited him to join Thiet Sach, but he wasn't interested. Absolutely merciless. Nguy Tac had to suppress the urge to throw his head back and laugh. He secretly watched Li Honglan. Sure enough, the handsome young master who had maintained such a relaxed, superior air now had a faint twitch at the corner of his eye. If Brother Lai wishes to enter with us, that's fine too, Nguy Tac added with a smile. Our token allows 4 people, and there are only 2 of us. We have plenty of room. That won't be necessary. Li Honglan forced out a smile. After the auction ends, there will be plenty of time for me to become better acquainted with Brother Nguy. He paused. It looked as though he wanted to invite Nam Kung Vu Ting to enter with him instead of Nguy Tac. But in the end, he restrained himself. He was not a fool. Provoking a cultivator whose background he could not identify, and who seemed to possess at least some hidden connections, would not be wise. The 3 of them eventually reached the entrance of the Long Tu Pavilion. Li Honglan walked ahead. Nguy Tac and Nam Kung Vu Ting followed at a slower pace, deliberately leaving some distance between them. Nam Kung Vu Ting, Nguy Tac whispered, leaning close to her ear. Who exactly is that guy? We just told him our token gives us 4 honored guest seats. If we go inside and discover they're ordinary seats, won't he laugh himself to death? You don't need to worry about that. Nam Kung Vu Tin leaned close to his ear in return. The Kim Nok Pavilion knows how to conduct business. The Jade Token Manager Dean gave us really does grant an honored guest room. Then she added quietly, Li Honglan is the young palace master of the Kim Thu Palace. The young palace master of the Kim Thu Palace? Nguy Tac immediately understood why Li Honglan had been casually playing with 2 blazing golden vulture cores. As far back as 10 or 20,000 years ago, certain sects and wandering cultivators had discovered methods for taming and breeding specific demonic beasts. In the present era, some sects specialized almost entirely in raising beasts. The Kim Thu Palace was one of them. It was said that the palace possessed methods for breeding several kinds of second-tier and third-tier demonic beasts. Most of its income came from selling demonic cores. However, cores produced by captive-bred beasts were generally inferior to those taken from beasts that grew naturally in the wild. Demonic beasts raised on medicinal substances and spiritual herbs tended to have certain weaknesses compared with truly wild beasts. Even so, the Kim Thu Palace had several powerful cultivators who had reached the Thought Division realm. Within Nguy City, it was considered one of the top major powers. "He likes you, doesn't he?" Nguy Tac whispered into Nam Kung Vu Ting's ear again. "But it doesn't look like you're interested in him." "That's right," she replied. "I'm using you as a shield." "What? Are you scared?" Nguy Tac chuckled. "Do I look qualified enough to be your shield?" Nam Kung Vu Ting answered honestly. "Almost." Then she burst out laughing. Nguy Tac and Nam Kung Vu Ting were whispering only because they did not want Li Honglan to hear. But to other people, especially cultivators who recognized Nam Kung Vu Ting, the scene looked completely different. The famous beauty of Thiet Sach was standing extremely close to an ordinary low-level cultivator, leaning into his ear and whispering intimately. Just who was that seemingly ordinary man? Li Honglan, walking ahead, heard Nam Kung Vu Ting laugh behind him. Jealousy immediately rose in his heart. With the strength of a marketplace like the Kim Nok Pavilion, they probably don't even need the Thian Nhat sect's protection. Even a Thought Division expert who came here to cause trouble would probably get beaten senseless. 4 richly dressed cultivators wearing the emblem of the Kim Nok Pavilion stood at the entrance to the Lang Tu Pavilion. Nguy Tac activated the aura reading art and looked at them. All 4 radiated such intense light, accompanied by a faint roaring sensation like rushing water, that he could not read their exact cultivation. He was shocked. The 4 men whose job was merely to welcome guests into the auction were all Heavenly Circuit cultivators. It seemed that the top marketplaces in Nguy City possessed strength comparable to actual sects. They simply earned their spirit stones in a different way. Nguy Tac then saw Li Honglan take out a red jade token of his own. Nguy Tac almost laughed. That token seemed to have only the character 3 engraved on it. In other words, Li Honglan could bring at most 2 other people inside with him. Nguy Tac and Nam Kung Vu Ting's token allowed 4 people. Their treatment was actually 1 level higher than his. No wonder the corner of Li Honglan's eye had twitched when Nguy Tac casually mentioned that they had plenty of room, and no wonder he had stopped insisting that Nam Kung Vu Ting enter with him. After examining Nguy Tac and Nam Kung Vu Ting's token, the 4 Heavenly Circuit cultivators politely invited them inside. The moment they passed the entrance, 2 brocade-clad attendants came forward to guide them. Every few dozen steps along the corridors of the Lang Tu Pavilion, a night luminous pearl had been embedded into the wall. Each pearl was far larger than the one Nguy Tac owned, and together they illuminated the entire passage. The pillars on both sides were inlaid with different kinds of colored refined metals, arranged into images of rare birds and strange beasts. The floor was paved with pale yellow warm jade. Anyone walking through the pavilion felt surrounded by warmth and luxury. Several statues of beautiful women also stood along the corridor, holding ceremonial scepters or flower vases. Nguy Tac spent quite a while staring at them. One looked remarkably similar to Tui Ling Ni. The others were not much less beautiful. Clearly, the sculptors had modeled them after some of the most famous beauties in the cultivation world of the Thian Huyan continent. A thought suddenly struck Nguy Tac. Walking beside Nam Kung Vu Ting already made him feel this proud. What would it be like if a legendary beauty such as Tui Ling Ni were walking beside him instead? The Lang Tu Pavilion had 2 levels. The lower level was a vast hall supported by 6 enormous dragon-carved pillars. All 6 had been carved from polished dark red wood. Red velvet draperies hung evenly around the chamber. At the northern end of the hall stood a raised platform reached by 9 steps. Sunlight entered through colored glass windows high in the ceiling and was refracted directly onto the platform. Obviously, that was where the auction items would be displayed. At least 300 chairs filled the enormous hall. Every 3 or 4 chairs were separated from the others by woven rattan screens, forming small private seating areas. The second floor consisted of a balcony circling the entire hall, lined with numerous honored guest rooms. From those rooms, guests could look down over the entire auction floor. Ha! The Kim Nok Pavilion really knows how to treat its guests. With service like this, it'll be hard not to bring them good things in the future. Sure enough, the 2 richly dressed attendants led Nguy Tac and Nam Kung Vu Ting into a private honored guest room on the eastern side of the second floor. Nguy Tac already knew Nam Kung Vu Ting had attended auctions more than once, so he had no reason to doubt her. Even so, seeing the private room for himself gave him an indescribably pleasant feeling. The room was spacious. A deep red fur carpet made from the hide of some demonic beast Nguy Tac could not identify covered the floor. 4 redwood chairs stood near the balcony, accompanied by several small tea tables. Forget 2 people. Even 10 could have sat inside comfortably. Nguy Tac looked down. More than 100 cultivators were already seated in the auction hall below. He instinctively tried to activate the aura reading art again, but the moment his true essence began circulating, his expression changed slightly. A sensation as cold as water suddenly enveloped his entire body. The aura reading art immediately failed. What is it? Were you trying to use a spell? Nam Kung Vu Tin noticed his expression and smiled. The Lang Tu Pavilion contains a special formation called the 7 Extinction Formation. Even if a Golden Core cultivator tries to use a spell here, its power will be greatly reduced. Cultivators below that level can't cast most spells inside at all. There's actually a formation that powerful? Nguy Tac relaxed. He had no intention of robbing the auction house. As long as his aura reading art had not suddenly broken, he did not care how powerful the formation was. Right. Nguy Tac suddenly remembered something. He turned toward Nam Kung Vu Tin. You said earlier that you wanted to talk to me privately. What was it about? It's nothing too serious, Great Talisman Master Nguy. Nam Kung Vu Tin smiled and leaned close to his ear. Your fireball talismans are very well made. Great Talisman Master Nguy? To anyone watching from outside, Nam Kung Vu Tin was whispering intimately into his ear. But the moment those words entered Nguy Tac's ears, his entire body stiffened. Don't bother denying it. A faintly triumphant look appeared on her face. I investigated you carefully. Your name is Nguy Tac. Not long ago, you were still only at the 2nd level of the Divine Sea Realm. Your hairstyle was rather memorable, so I found several people who saw you pick up fireball talismans at Hak Bao Pond. They said you found more than 100 of them. Later, I discovered that you sold them all, she continued. But when we fought Lam Dao Nhat, you still had a huge number of fireball talismans on you. And recently, you've also been buying fire scorpions. So tell me, do those unusual fireball talismans of yours have something to do with fire scorpions? Beauty, why do you have so much free time that you're investigating me? Nguy Tac felt miserable. If you're bored, go buy some beautiful robes. Find some spiritual herbs that improve your skin. Isn't taking care of your face a better use of your time? What? You think my face is ugly? Nam Kung Vu Tin deliberately leaned even closer. Against her white robe, her skin looked smooth and luminous like jade. Normally, Nguy Tac would have been unable to tear his eyes away from the pale valley that could make a man's nose bleed. Right now, however, he had no mind for it. He gave a bitter smile. Looks like you won't believe me if I deny it anyway. What exactly do you want? From now on, when you sell fireball talismans to me, can I get a discount? Fine. How much of a discount? I was joking. You actually took that seriously? Nam Kung Vu Ting laughed. Then her expression became more serious. But I really don't understand what you're thinking. You're a talisman refiner. Plenty of major sects would compete to recruit you. Why take risks hunting demonic beasts just to earn spirit stones for cultivation? If you knew about the formula and the old man in green, you definitely wouldn't say that. Nguy Tac thought it but did not say it. Instead, he shook his head. I don't want to spend every day from morning to night doing nothing but refining talismans. Hunting demonic beasts gives me more freedom. I don't like being tied down. Nam Kung Vu Ting nodded. She understood. There were people in the world who valued certain things more than pure profit. She looked at him for a moment, then leaned close to whisper again. Don't worry. I'll keep your secret. You'll keep it secret? And I don't have to do anything for you? Nguy Tac looked surprised. What? You'd prefer me to demand something? Nam Kung Vu Tin laughed. Fine. In that case, from now on, whenever I need your help, you're not allowed to refuse. Nguy Tac was already considering whether he should change his name and move somewhere else when he suddenly noticed someone staring toward their room from the honored guest chamber on the left. He looked over, then immediately muttered to himself. What an idiot! It was the handsome and elegant Lai Honglan. His room was not far from theirs. If either side raised their voice slightly, the other could probably hear. More importantly, Lai Honglan's room was clearly larger and more luxurious than Nguy Tac's. He had obviously arranged for the auction staff to give him a better room nearby, purely so he could show off. There were around 40 or 50 honored guest rooms on the 2nd floor of the Lang Tu Pavilion. Because this was only a small auction, barely more than 20 were occupied. Almost everyone inside sat quietly toward the back. Only Lai Honglan seemed determined to make sure Nguy Tac could see how impressive he was. A short while later, nearly 200 cultivators had gathered in the main hall. Manager Dean of the Kim Ngok Pavilion, now dressed in a purple robe, slowly walked onto the raised platform. After greeting everyone, he immediately announced the official beginning of the auction. Our first item is silver steel essence. a high-grade refined metal used in artifact forging. The starting price is 500 low-grade spirit stones. A brocade-clad attendant carried a jade box to Manager Dian and opened it. The first auction item was a fist-sized lump of silver refined metal. It glittered coldly inside the box and gave off a sharp metallic aura. Damn, that's silver steel essence? Nguy Tac's attention was completely captured. Silver steel essence was an extremely flexible, refined metal. Adding even a small amount to ordinary refined metal could greatly improve its toughness. Because of this, cultivators desperately sought it when forging flying swords. Adding a little silver steel essence to otherwise ordinary materials could raise the quality of the resulting flying sword significantly and make its edge far sharper. Among cultivators of the Tianhuian continent, flying swords were considered relatively straightforward magical treasures to refine. Nguy Tac had seen several powerful cultivators use them before. Their offensive power was truly terrifying. However, even the most ordinary flying sword usually required at least the second level of the heavenly circuit realm to control properly. A cultivator below that level lacked enough true essence to command the sword at any meaningful distance. It would only be able to fly close to the body, making it far less useful. Nguy Tac's cultivation was nowhere near enough to use a flying sword. Even so, just thinking about the power of such weapons, and how much this lump of silver steel essence could improve an ordinary flying sword made him badly want it. Quite a few heavenly circuit cultivators were attending the auction. There was no chance such an item would go unsold. 500 low-grade spirit stones. I'll take it! Sure enough, the moment Manager Dian finished the brief introduction, a thin, middle-aged cultivator wearing a red cultivation robe raised his hand and shouted. His face was narrow and heavily lined. Every eye in the hall immediately turned toward him. 600 low-grade spirit stones. A hoarse voice suddenly came from an honored guest room almost directly opposite Nguy Tac's. 650. The red-robed cultivator turned sharply and stared toward the room with an extremely fierce gaze. The hoarse voice did not sound intimidated in the slightest. 700 low-grade spirit stones. 800. The red-robed cultivator sneered, killing intent flashing in his eyes. 1,000. The person inside the honored guest room responded in the same indifferent tone. 1,000. The entire hall erupted into murmurs. Silver steel essence was rare. For someone who truly needed it, 1,000 low-grade spirit stones might still be acceptable. But the person in the private room had casually raised the price by 200 spirit stones in a single bid. From that utterly calm tone, it sounded as though no matter how high the price climbed, the bidder intended to take the silver steel essence. The red-robed cultivator froze. The fierceness in his eyes immediately faded. He did not bid again. Anyone who could casually throw out 1,000 low-grade spirit stones was probably someone he could not afford to provoke. No one else raised the price. While Nguy Tac touched his own spirit stone pouch and stared down enviously, the attendant beside Manager Dian carried the silver steel essence to the winning bidder's room. The very first item had already triggered fierce competition. The atmosphere inside the auction hall immediately became much more heated. The next item is the inner core of a 4th-tier middle-rank stone-eater beast. The starting price is 300 low-grade spirit stones. Damn, everything here is good. The second auction item was an earth-yellow demonic core that gave off a strong, earthy smell. An ordinary 4th-tier middle-rank demonic core was worth around 200 low-grade spirit stones. But the Stone-Eater Beast's core contained a special earth element energy that was extremely useful to cultivators who practiced earth element techniques. On top of that, Stone-Eater Beasts were born with the ability to burrow through earth. At the slightest sign of danger, they vanished underground. That made them extremely difficult to hunt. Manager Dian set the opening price at 300 low-grade spirit stones. Nguy Tac knew that was somewhat low. Sure enough, only a short while later, a yellow-faced cultivator, who appeared to practice some kind of earth element art, purchased the core for 500 low-grade spirit stones. Next is the Heavenly Frost Armor. This defensive treasure had been refined from the shell of a 4th-tier ice centipede. Its defensive power was astonishing, and it could also release waves of freezing energy. However, the armor was quite heavy. It was much better suited to a powerful, force-oriented cultivator such as Diep Tu Chin. Nguy Tac wanted it, but not badly enough to compete. The next 5 or 6 items were all special materials used to refine particular magical artifacts and treasures. There was Fire Dragon Crystal, which contained an astonishing amount of true fire. There was Thousand-Year Ironwood, which bonded extremely well with spiritual energy and was useful for refining wood element treasures. There was also Wind Spirit Stone, a material capable of making magical treasures naturally float and reducing their effective weight. Nguy Tac knew the old man in green possessed many methods for refining magical treasures. However, his cultivation was still too low, so the old man refused to teach him those methods. For the moment, these rare materials were no more useful to Nguy Tac than the silver steel essence. Next is a void fusion pill. Manager Dian's voice rang through the hall. This pill was personally refined by Ko Na, the alchemist of the treasure pavilion. For cultivators below the thought division realm, taking the pill can immediately raise cultivation by 1 level. However, the medicinal force causes a certain amount of damage to both the divine seas and the physical body. For the following 5 years, further cultivation progress becomes extremely difficult. The starting price is 1,000 low-grade spirit stones. The item manager Dean revealed caused almost every cultivator in the hall, including Nguy Tac, to gasp softly. Inside a golden box lay a red pill about the size of a pigeon's egg. The void fusion pill was refined from the demonic core of a union wind beast, the blood of a heavenly void bloodbird, and several other spiritual medicines. It was extremely difficult to make and famous throughout the Thian Huiyan continent. Suppose a cultivator were battling a demonic beast or enemy who was only slightly stronger. That small difference might mean death. At a moment like that, possessing a pill capable of instantly raising one's cultivation by an entire level could completely reverse the situation. Compared with staying alive, what did 5 years of slowed cultivation matter? Even 50 years would be preferable to dying. Besides, some cultivators might not advance even 1 level in 5 years anyway. There was no doubt this pill would be fiercely contested. Its final price would be terrifying. And there was another reason people wanted it. The pill had been personally refined by Ko Na, the famous ice-cold beauty of Xianxia City. Nguy Tac had never met her, but according to rumor, Ko Na was regarded as the #1 beauty in the entire city. That reputation alone had attracted countless admirers. 1,500 low-grade spirit stones. Nguy Tac wanted the pill too. But just as he expected, the very first bid called from the western end of the honored guest rooms was already beyond what he could afford, even if he sold his underwear. 4,000 low-grade spirit stones. In the end, the famous void fusion pill, personally refined by the renowned beauty Ko Na, sold for the astonishing price of 4,000 low-grade spirit stones. Nguy Tac wanted it so badly he could almost cry. Recently, he had made several windfalls in a row, and had begun developing the faint confidence of a newly rich man. Sitting inside this auction, however, he suddenly realized he was still dirt poor compared with the truly wealthy cultivators. Looks like I need to work even harder at making spirit stones. Golden Silk Talisman Brush! Manager Dean announced the next item. Refined from the tail hair of a 4th-tier golden maned beast, a high-quality product of the Thian Kong workshop in Lac Nuiat City. Starting price, 300 low-grade spirit stones. Nguy Tac froze. A golden talisman brush lay quietly on the red silk lining of a wooden tray. It was roughly as thick as a finger. The brush tip was made from brilliant golden tail hairs. It was difficult to imagine a demonic beast having individual hairs that thick. After spending so much time with the old man in green, Nguy Tac's knowledge had improved considerably. He knew that a high-quality talisman brush absorbed fire scorpion blood more evenly and moved more smoothly across talisman paper. That meant cleaner runes, better talisman quality, and a higher success rate when refining. What do you think, great talisman master Nguy? Nam Kung Vu Tin whispered teasingly into his ear when she saw his expression. Tempted? So what if I am? I still can't afford it. Nguy Tac looked deeply miserable. If you want it, then buy it. If you need to borrow a few hundred spirit stones, I have some. Nam Kung Vu Ting smiled. Nguy Tac was instantly, completely tempted. Even if a better brush increased his refining success rate by only a small amount, the benefit would become enormous over time. If he converted all of his current mid-grade and low-grade spirit stones into one value, he had a little more than 200 low-grade spirit stones. But he could not spend all of that. At minimum, he needed to keep 100 for cultivation and for purchasing fire scorpions. The starting price of the Golden Silk Talisman Brush was only 300 low-grade spirit stones. But judging from the earlier auction items, Nguy Tac expected the final price to be at least 600. That meant he might need to borrow 500 low-grade spirit stones or more. A few hundred spirit stones. Nguy Tac looked at Nam Kung Vu Ting, his palms already damp with sweat. I only have about 100 low-grade spirit stones that I can actually spend. How many do you have? You really are something. Nam Kung Vu Tin found his expression amusing. Roughly 700 low-grade spirit stones. 700? You're a little rich woman. Nguy Tac was so moved he nearly cried. But he still did not feel completely safe. What if I can't repay you immediately? Are there any conditions attached? Nam Kung Vu Ting rolled her eyes. You are unbelievably troublesome. Are you borrowing them or not? If not, pretend I never said anything. Besides, you don't dare sell too many fireball talismans at once anyway. If you can't repay me in spirit stones, pay me in fireball talismans. I use them too. Borrow. Only an idiot wouldn't borrow. By then, Someone in the hall had already raised the price of the brush to 350 low-grade spirit stones. Nguy Tac immediately shouted, 400! 450! Another bidder answered from below, 500! Nguy Tac had never bought anything this expensive in his life. He almost ground his teeth while making the bid. 550! A cultivator wearing animal hide clothing hesitated, then added another 50. It's just a damn brush. Why are all of you fighting me over it? Nguy Tac cursed inwardly, then raised his voice again. 600! Several of the cultivators who had been bidding shook their heads and immediately withdrew. They did not know who Nguy Tac was. All they knew was that someone sitting in an honored guest room was willing to spend 600 low-grade spirit stones on a talisman brush. They naturally assumed he had an impressive background. And for an ordinary talisman refiner, 600 low-grade spirit stones was no small amount. Almost no normal talisman refiner could make money from fireball talismans as efficiently as Nguy Tac did. Phew! Nguy Tac breathed out. Fortunately, there were not many talisman refiners in Linyak City. Otherwise, the competition might have been far worse. 700 low-grade spirit stones. Just as the richly dressed attendant was about to carry the golden silk talisman brush toward Nguy Tac's room, a lazy voice drifted from the honored guest room on the left. Damn that childish bastard! Nguy Tac's vision almost went black from rage. The new bidder was none other than the handsome, elegant Lai Honglan. 800 low-grade spirit stones. Nguy Tac had already gone as high as 700. He did not want to give up now. Grinding his teeth, he added another 900 low-grade spirit stones. Lai Honglan raised the price in an utterly casual tone. Damn! Nguy Tac fell silent. He was almost certain Lai Honglan did not even need the talisman brush. From the way the man had deliberately changed rooms earlier, it was obvious he was simply trying to suppress Nguy Tac and make him lose face. Tac hated the fact that he did not have more spirit stones. If he were rich enough, he would gladly throw spirit stones until he buried Lai Honglan alive beneath them. But 900 low-grade spirit stones was already Nguy Tac's absolute limit. If he raised the price to 1,000 and Lai Honglan suddenly withdrew, Nguy Tac could not actually afford to pay. I'm going over there to curse him out. Even Nam Kung Vu Ting became irritated and started to rise. No need to rush. To her surprise, Nguy Tac pulled her back down. Let's wait and see what else comes up, he said it casually. Nam Kung Vu Ting looked at him strangely. Nguy Tac still wore the resentful expression of a newly rich man, forced to watch money slip through his fingers. But when he gently tugged her closer and whispered a few words, she realized he was pretending. Nam Kung Vu Ting still had no idea what scheme he was planning. She sat back down, full of suspicion. Divine Wood Pill Furnace. Juvenile Rot Poison Bat. The next several auction items were all unusual treasures. The Divine Wood Pill Furnace could be used to refine spirit pills and could improve the quality of wood element medicines. The Rot Poison Bat was a 4th-tier lower-rank demonic beast. When fully grown, its wingspan could reach several dozen feet. Once tamed, a cultivator could use it as a flying mount. The poisonous bat was also extremely dangerous. Nguy Tac, however, already had a plan. He remained silent and did not bid. Storage treasure pouch, Manager Dian's voice rang out. Internal space approximately 30 square jang. Starting price, 900 low-grade spirit stones. The entire hall immediately became restless again. The storage treasure pouch looked small from the outside, only a few feet in size. But the space inside was vastly larger. Even better, when worn on the body, the owner could not feel the weight of the items stored within. For any cultivator, especially wandering cultivators accustomed to carrying everything valuable they owned, such a treasure was extraordinarily precious. And that was not its only advantage. When a cultivator killed an enormous demonic beast or discovered a large deposit of valuable ore, there were many times when the entire harvest was simply too large to carry. They would be forced to cut away only the most valuable parts and reluctantly abandon the rest. With a storage treasure pouch, they could take everything. Not a single spirit stone's worth of material needed to be left behind. High-grade storage pouches and storage rings could even hold tens of thousands of pounds. The pouch being auctioned today looked as though it had been made from yellowed goatskin. Its internal volume was only around 30 square zhang. Even so, that was already far superior to low-grade storage pouches that could hold only 2 square zhang. Across the entire Tianhuian continent, very few artifact refiners knew how to create storage treasures. They were priceless objects that could not simply be purchased whenever someone wanted one. 1,200 low-grade spirit stones. Nguy Tac, who had remained quiet through several items, suddenly raised the price by 300 above the opening bid. Nguy Tac, you? Nam Kung Vu Ting's face went pale. She knew perfectly well that even if they combined all their available spirit stones, they did not have that much. A storage treasure pouch is extremely rare. I like it very much, Nguy Tac said loudly. The moment his words ended, Li Honglan muttered from the neighboring room, "I like it as well." Then he called out calmly, 1,300 low-grade spirit stones. "Stop bidding," Nam Kung Vu Tin hissed. She was afraid Nguy Tac might raise the price again. "If you win and can't pay, the auction house will confiscate everything you're carrying. You'll be permanently banned from trading with every major marketplace in Linyak City. You might even be expelled from Linyak City entirely." "Little sister Nam Kung Vu Tin, I'm sorry." The next words out of Nguy Tac's mouth left her staring at him in disbelief. "I don't have enough spirit stones. Earlier, you liked that golden silk talisman brush, but I couldn't buy it for you. Now you like this storage treasure pouch too, but I still don't have enough." He sighed dramatically. "Why don't we wait and see whether something else you like appears later?" Not only did Nguy Tac suddenly start calling her little sister Nam Kung Vu Tin, he even put on an expression of deep shame and regret. Inside the room to the left, Lai Honglan's eyes immediately brightened. At that moment, someone else raised the price to 1,350 low-grade spirit stones. Lai Honglan looked even more arrogant. 1,500! Nam Kung Vu Ting stared at Nguy Tac in shock. Heh. Nguy Tac lowered his head as though depressed. Then he secretly whispered to her, "That idiot will probably sell his underwear if that's what it takes to buy this pouch and give it to you. 1,800 low-grade spirit stones. 2,000! The golden glowing storage treasure pouch was so tempting that people almost drooled over it. Competition became fierce. A slightly overweight cultivator in a green robe sat in an honored guest room directly opposite Lai Honglan and continued bidding against him. The price climbed from 900 all the way to 2,000 low-grade spirit stones. "He's still bidding, so he must be pretty rich," Nguy Tac whispered. "But those two don't look poor either." He noticed sweat beginning to appear on Lai Honglan's forehead and winked at Nam Kung Vu Tin. "Who exactly is your little sister Nam Kung Vu Tin?" She was both annoyed and amused. Leaning toward his ear, she whispered, "You've gotten very comfortable calling me that, haven't you?" The sight of Nam Kung Vu Tin leaning close to Nguy Tac and whispering into his ear entered Li Honglan's eyes. He ground his teeth. 2,300 low-grade spirit stones. So that's the young palace master of the Kim Thu Palace. No wonder he's so generous. Look at him, spending that many spirit stones on a storage treasure pouch without blinking. Now that's impressive. A fairly attractive female cultivator in the main hall complained to the man beside her, who appeared to be pursuing her. Unlike some useless man who can't even come up with 1,000 low-grade spirit stones. After Li Honglan called out 2,300, his final two competitors withdrew. Manager Dian happily waved his hand. A brocade-clad attendant immediately lifted the wooden tray and carried the storage treasure pouch through the hall beneath countless envious gazes. He entered Lai Honglan's private room. "Young Palace Master Lai, your storage treasure pouch." The attendant respectfully presented the tray. Seen up close, the pouch was extremely beautiful. Its opening was tied with golden silk. Faint runes appeared and disappeared across the surface, and precious beads had been woven into decorative flower-shaped knots. "This?" Lai Honglan hesitated. "According to the auction rules, if I don't have enough spirit stones with me, can I use other items of equivalent value?" The attendant paused, then answered professionally. "If the item's value can be clearly determined, there should be no problem. Here are 200 mid-grade spirit stones. Count them." The corner of Lai Honglan's eye twitched slightly as he handed over a pouch of spirit stones. Then he took out a snow-white insect egg about the size of a pigeon's egg. It released an intense freezing aura. "This is the egg of a 4th-tier upper-rank frost-flying centipede. Once hatched, it can be tamed. It's worth at least 300 low-grade spirit stones. If it is truly a frost-flying centipede egg, then there is no problem." The attendant counted the spirit stones, accepted the egg, and prepared to leave. "Wait!" The moment the attendant turned away, the pain on Lai Honglan's face became obvious. He called the young man back. "I didn't bring enough spirit stones today, so I'm temporarily using the frost-flying centipede egg as collateral. Please tell Manager Dian not to sell it for the moment. I'll bring spirit stones within the next few days and redeem it." The attendant nodded. Normally, the Kim Ngok Pavilion does not offer that arrangement, but young Palace Master Lai is a regular customer with an excellent reputation. "I'll report it to Manager Dean. It should not be a problem. Then you have my thanks." Li Honglan finally smiled again and regained his usual proud expression. He pointed toward the golden silk talisman brush and the storage treasure pouch. "Please take both of these items to the honored guest room next door. Give them to Nam Kung Vu Tin and tell her they are gifts from me." The attendant nodded and left. Lai Honglan muttered to himself, "What does Nam Kung Vu Ting need a golden silk talisman brush for? Is she planning to learn talisman refining from one of Thiat Saksh's talisman masters? You've got to be kidding me." Inside Nguy Tac's room, he stared wide-eyed as the attendant brought both items over. Brother Lai Honglan really is generous. Then Tak broke into a huge grin. He had not expected Lai Honglan to send not only the storage treasure pouch, but also the golden silk talisman brush Nguy Tac had wanted so badly. The brocade-clad attendant looked at Nguy Tac with sympathy. Poor fellow, after today, Nam Kung Vu Ting probably won't stay with you anymore. Just as the attendant was about to leave, Nguy Tac suddenly raised his head. By the way, may I ask something? After young Master Lai paid just now, about how many spirit stones does he still have left? I don't know. The Kim Nok Pavilion prided itself on not deceiving customers, and the attendant also felt sorry for Nguy Tac, so he answered honestly. Probably not many. The final 300 low-grade spirit stones were covered with the frost-flying centipede egg. Understood. Thank you. After the attendant left, Nam Kung Vu Ting finally could not hold back. You really are something. You've already made him spend that many spirit stones and you're still not satisfied? What do you mean I made him spend them? He offered them himself. Nguy Tac had now moved farther back into the room, where Lai Honglan could no longer see him. Without any need to pretend, he happily picked up the golden silk talisman brush. This really is good stuff! He could not help sighing in admiration. The talisman brush looked as though it had been cast from pure gold. It glittered beautifully, yet it was surprisingly light in the hand. When Nguy Tac gently drew the tip across his palm, it flowed like water without the slightest resistance. Nam Kung Vu Tin, if it weren't for you, Lai Honglan would never have sent these two things over. After playing with the golden silk talisman brush to his heart's content, Nguy Tac reluctantly restrained himself. How about this? The storage treasure pouch belongs to you. When I need it, you can lend it to me. I don't want anything from him. Nam Kung Vu Ting rolled her eyes. Look at how much that hurts you. If you like it, keep it. That's worth more than 2,000 spirit stones. Naturally, Nguy Tac did not hesitate. He nodded immediately. Then he looked at Nam Kung Vu Tin. But there's something I don't understand. His cultivation isn't bad. He's handsome. He's the young palace master of the Kim Thu Palace. And he's generous with money. Isn't that the same as you refusing to join Thiet Sak? Nam Kung Vu Ting looked at him. If I accepted him and entered the Kim Thu Palace, wouldn't I have to give up many things too? She continued calmly. There are people who remain themselves even without a powerful backing. But if Lai Honglan leaves the Kim Thu Palace behind, I'm not sure he would still be Lai Honglan. If I ever like someone, I'll like the person himself, not whatever stands behind him. Now that's personality. Nguy Tac raised a thumb. At the same time, he thought to himself, the reason I like Thuy Ling Ni is her body, that captivating face, and those magnificent twin peaks. It has absolutely nothing to do with whose disciple she is. Mid-grade cold jade. Manager Dean's voice rang out once more. This slab is exceptionally large, almost flawless, and extremely rare. Starting price, 600 low-grade spirit stone. Nguy Tac and Nam Kung Vu Tin immediately became excited. 700 low-grade spirit stones. 800! Nguy Tac nearly shed tears of joy again. The slab of cold jade, displayed on red velvet, had already been polished by the Kim Nok Pavilion. The damaged section containing the crack had been removed. What remained was smooth and flawless from end to end. For an artifact refiner, this was practically a ready-made foundation for creating an ice element magical treasure. Everyone attending the auction was knowledgeable. The moment Manager Dean finished his introduction, several cultivators began competing. The price rose rapidly. In the end, an elderly Taoist wearing a moon-white robe purchased the cold jade for 1,500 low-grade spirit stones. The proceeds still had to be divided between Nguy Tac, Nam Kung Vu Ting, Diep Tu Chin, and Diep Ko Vi. The Kim Nok Pavilion would also deduct its 10% auction fee. Even so, Nguy Tac would receive at least another 200 low-grade spirit stones, a golden silk talisman brush, a storage treasure pouch, and another 200 low-grade spirit stones. Nguy Tac felt as though his life had suddenly begun blooming like spring flowers. The Kim Nok Pavilion paid quickly. Since Nguy Tac and Nam Kung Vu Ting were both present, the moment the jade sold and the necessary fees were deducted, the spirit stones were delivered directly to their honored guest room. Because the amount was large, most of the payment had been converted into mid-grade spirit stones. 80 mid-grade spirit stones lay neatly on a red wooden tray, glowing with an irresistible pale golden light. Beside them were 10 low-grade spirit stones. This guy is unbelievably stingy. The brocade-clad attendant who delivered the spirit stones secretly curled his lip when Nguy Tac gave no reaction. Most customers who sold something for a good price would give the attendant a small reward. Generous guests might even hand over all 10 low-grade spirit stones on the side. Nguy Tac did not give him even one. Of course, if the attendant had known that not long ago, Nguy Tac rarely possessed more than a few low-grade spirit stones at any given time, and had once been reluctant to spend even one per day on cultivations, he might have understood the reason for that stinginess. Hold on to the share belonging to Diep Tu Chin and Diep Ko Vi. Give it to them the next time you meet. Nguy Tac took 20 mid-grade spirit stones and 2 low-grade spirit stones for himself. He handed the remainder to Nam Kung Vu Tin. He can be shameless sometimes, but he's not a bad person. Nam Kung Vu Tin accepted the spirit stones without argument. Her tone softened. We should leave. Leave now? Nguy Tac looked confused. We're not watching the rest? I don't want to talk to him. Nam Kung Vu Tin pouted slightly. If we wait until the auction ends, he'll probably come over. Fair enough. Nguy Tac thought about it. Even though he had recently become much richer, compared with the cultivators attending this auction, he was still extremely poor. If storage treasure pooches were not so rare enough that even having money in the future might not guarantee he could buy one, he would have preferred to convert it directly into spirit stones. Now the golden silk talisman brush and his share of the auction money were already in his hands. He had experienced the excitement of a real auction. All he wanted to do now was go home, refine talismans, and make more spirit stones. 4 communication spirit talismans, effective within a range of 300 miles. Starting price, 300 low-grade spirit stones. Nam Kung Vu Ting had already been preparing to leave with Nguy Tac, but when she heard the next item, she stopped and moved closer to the balcony. Damn, Nguy Tac stepped out as well. In the neighboring room, Li Honglan kept smiling toward Nam Kung Vu Ting. Then he looked at Nguy Tac with the triumphant expression of a victorious general. What? You actually need these things? Nguy Tac looked curiously at the 4 communication talismans. There were 2 common methods of long-distance communication on the Thian Haiyan continent. The first was through trained spiritual beasts, such as lightning-winged birds, stone-armored insects, or spirit cranes. The second was through artifacts and magical treasures refined specifically for communication. More advanced communication artifacts could carry letters or jade slips and fly directly to the intended recipient. Some allowed voice transmission over thousands of miles. The best could even transmit spoken messages directly. These 4 communication jade talismans looked attractive. They were deep red purple and carved into the shapes of 4 small fish. But their functions were fairly limited. They seemed to have been carved from a special crystal. When true essence was poured into one, the other 3 would simply light up at the same time. At most, they could notify friends that someone wanted to meet at a predetermined location. They could not transmit any additional information. Nguy Tac knew that major sects often possessed far more advanced communication treasures, but those were vastly more expensive than these 4 talismans. He had been poor for too long. Whenever he spent spirit stones, he followed one simple principle. The purchase had to be useful. Even if these 4 talismans cost only 100 low-grade spirit stones, he would not have wanted them. The cultivators attending the auction were not fools either. Very few showed interest. Only after a long pause did someone bid 330 low-grade spirit stones. You really want them? To Nguy Tac's surprise, Nam Kung Vu Ting raised the price, 350 low-grade spirit stones. No one bid again. A brocade-clad attendant from the Kim Nok Pavilion soon carried the 4 communication jade talismans to their room on a red wooden tray. What? You're giving 3 of them to me? Nguy Tac stared. Nam Kung Vu Ting kept only 1 and handed the other 3 to him. What did you think I spent all those spirit stones for? She smiled. Don't forget the condition you agreed to. Huh? What condition? Nam Kung Vu Ting gave him a look. You agreed that whenever I need your help, you'll do your best to help me. What happens if I need you and can't find you? Nguy Tac, I only need 1 talisman anyway. When you see one of yours light up, you'll know I need help. Go to the largest public notice board in the northern market and meet me there. If it's urgent, I'll leave information for you. Nam Kung Vu Ting glanced at him again. You have 3 communication talismans now. Don't pretend you happen to lose all 3 and never saw them light up. How could I possibly do that? Sweat appeared on Nguy Tac's forehead. After all, you helped me get a golden silk talisman brush and a storage treasure pouch today. How could I treat you like that? Good, then let's go. Nam Kung Vu Ting smiled beautifully and walked out of the honored guest room. The 2 parted reluctantly outside the Lang Tu Pavilion. Nguy Tac wanted to hug her the way he had shamelessly taken advantage of Diep Kovi, but Nam Kung Vu Ting's eyes seemed capable of seeing every improper thought in his head. He wanted to try. He simply did not dare. Although he had called her little sister Nam Kung Vu Tin inside the auction, there were times when Nguy Tac actually felt she was more like an older sister. Her cultivation was higher. She knew far more about Lin Yak City, and many of the useful things Nguy Tac had learned recently had come directly from her. Thinking about an older sister gave him a strange feeling. His parents had gone beyond the Heaven's Dome when he was still very young and had never returned. Since then, he had not had any family. She wants my help? Nguy Tac sighed. With my current cultivation, I'm not even as strong as that pretty-faced Lai Honglan. He touched the golden silk talisman brush inside his robe. The smooth texture made his mood suddenly become serious. Once he returned home, he needed to work even harder at talisman refining. His desire to earn spirit stones and become stronger grew even more intense. Late that night, the night luminous pearl hanging from an ice silk spider thread on the ceiling illuminated Nguy Tac's little stone house. The golden silk talisman brush flashed like a golden fish swimming across the talisman paper. It moved smoothly through the final curve. Then Nguy Tac lifted it. The bright red talisman paper released a flash of crimson light. Every rune across its surface seemed to flow. A first-tier fireball talisman had been successfully completed. The golden silk talisman brush really is good. Nguy Tac compared the newly refined fireball talisman with those he had made before. The runes drawn with the golden silk brush were smoother and more even. The talisman also gave off a stronger fire aura. Its quality had improved. That meant its power had increased as well. 7 other fireball talismans refined with the golden silk brush lay on the stone table beside him. Including the one in his hand, Nguy Tac had attempted 10 in succession, only 2 had failed. His success rate had already reached 80%, and even when he failed now, the talisman would merely become useless. It no longer burst into violent flames the way his early failures had. A new iron rack stood near the wall. Rows of tightly sealed bottles and jars sat on it, all filled with fire scorpion blood. Satisfied, Nguy Tac looked at the golden silk talisman brush and the freshly refined fireball talisman. Then he pulled the beautifully embroidered storage treasure pouch from inside his robe. He poured a small amount of purple true essence into it. The mouth of the pouch suddenly opened. Golden light poured out. Spirit stones and fireball talismans floated strangely within the glowing stream. Nguy Tac reached into the light and pulled out a mid-grade spirit stone. Then he gently tugged the golden cord at the mouth of the pouch. Everything still floating in the golden glow was immediately sucked back inside. Nguy Tac had just picked up the mid-grade spirit stone and was about to begin cultivating when he heard the old man in green make a soft sound of surprise. "Did you find something?" Nguy Tac immediately became energetic again. He had accumulated some wealth now, but his instincts toward treasure had not changed in the slightest. Inspired by the green jade spell slips, Nguy Tac had recently bought a stack of ordinary jade records while collecting fire scorpions. These jade slips contained no restrictions. They recorded information about the Thian Huyen continent, introductions to demonic beasts and spiritual herbs, the origins of various place names, refining minerals, and other practical knowledge. They were essentially sets of cultivation encyclopedias and did not cost many spirit stones. Nguy Tac had realized they would be useful for both himself and the old man in green. Most of the old man's knowledge came from 10 or 20,000 years ago. Countless place names and environments had changed since then. If they trusted the old man's ancient memories and traveled to a place that used to contain only low-level demonic beasts, only to discover that the area was now filled with high-level monsters, there would be nowhere to cry afterward. The old man in green knew many talisman formulas, pill recipes, and refining methods. Nguy Tac had already told him about the common spiritual herbs and demonic cores he knew. But Nguy Tac's own knowledge was limited. These jade records were far more complete and covered medicinal plants, ores, artifact refining materials, and countless other things. The old man in green had effectively slept for 20,000 years. With these records available, he had become like an ancient scholar suddenly given an entire modern library. He read obsessively, sometimes throughout the night. Over the last few days, his knowledge had improved enormously. He had even learned several popular modern sing, and now liked throwing them into conversations with Nguy Tac. "Good stuff, my ass." Sure enough, the moment Nguy Tac asked, the old man in green rolled his eyes and spat out one of those newly learned expressions. "I'm not short of good things. But you'll have access to another one as soon as you break through to the 4th level of the Divine Sea realm." "Haven't I already been cultivating day and night?" Nguy Tac immediately became annoyed. "I'll open the 4th Divine Sea sooner or later." However, the old man continued, "I did discover that the materials for a certain kind of talisman are extremely common in the present era. I don't know whether you'd be interested in refining it." Nguy Tac immediately perked up. "What kind of talisman? If it's useful, I'll start making it." "It's called the Illusory Light Talisman," the old man replied. "It has no offensive power. That is precisely why the formula was lost more than 10,000 years ago. And now, the materials needed to make it are everywhere." "No offensive power?" Nguy Tac frowned. "What exactly does this talisman do?" "It releases a special kind of green light," the old man in green explained. "The talisman can perfectly imitate the appearance of almost any spell or demonic beast, but it only frightens the opponent. It has no actual offensive power. If the enemy uses a spell or magical treasure to block it, they'll immediately realize the image is fake," he continued. "Depending on the runic pattern you refine into it, An illusory light talisman can produce the image of a fireball, or even the image of some high-level demonic beast. However, the talisman relies entirely on the properties of its materials. It gives off no magical fluctuations, and activating it consumes no true essence at all. That also makes it very difficult to detect before it's used. Interesting, Nguy Tac chuckled. He immediately told the old man to explain the refining method. The formula had been lost for many years. That meant very few people in the current era would recognize the talisman. Even if an opponent discovered the trick almost immediately, the first instant of confusion could still distract them. And most demonic beasts below the third tier were not intelligent enough to analyze the illusion quickly. Against beasts like those, this talisman could be extremely useful. Boundless crystal? Nguy Tac repeated the name of one of the ingredients. Sure enough, the materials needed for the illusory light talisman were all very common. The talisman paper was made from yellow silk grass and bitter gold chrysanthemum. The talisman inks required boundless crystal, vermilion azure stone, and cuttlefish oil. What is it? The old man asked. Is boundless crystal rare now? I read in one of the jade records you brought back that it's fairly common and not worth much. Not exactly. Nguy Tac chuckled while secretly sweating. I actually have a piece. It turned out boundless crystal was also known by another name, image imprinting crystal. If the crystal was held beneath sunlight and pointed toward a person, it could retain that person's image for a brief instant. If combined with a special type of glazed crystal and engraved with the proper formation, the image could even be preserved for an entire month. When Nguy Tac first heard about that property, his thoughts had immediately gone somewhere indecent. If he ever secretly watched a beauty bathing, wouldn't it be wonderful to store that scene inside a crystal sphere made from boundless crystal and replay it as much as he wanted after returning home? So when he once saw someone selling a piece in the free market, he bought it. Unfortunately, he had never managed to find the required glazed crystal. Eventually, he forgot about the entire idea. Who would have expected that the boundless crystal would now become useful for something else? Damn, refining an illusory light talisman is even more troublesome than refining a fireball talisman. You have to draw the formation twice? Nguy Tac carefully memorized the list of materials from the old man and immediately went out to buy them. All the ingredients were easy to find. Excluding the boundless crystal he already owned, the rest cost only 2 low-grade spirit stones for a large batch. But when the old man in green used green light to demonstrate the refining process and rune patterns, Nguy Tac became slightly surprised. An illusory light talisman required 2 separate rounds of rune drawing. First, the talisman paper had to be created. Then the black boundless crystal had to be ground into powder and heated until it completely dissolved into cuttlefish oil. This mixture became the first talisman ink. The first rune formation had to be drawn with that ink. Once the first stage succeeded, the half-finished talisman had to absorb an image. After that, an entirely different second rune formation had to be drawn. Only then would one complete illusory light talisman be finished. There was another problem. If the second rune formation was not completed within the time it took 2 incense sticks to burn, the finished talisman would have no effect at all. The complexity of each rune layer was no lower than that of a fireball talisman, and every extra stage introduced another opportunity for failure. In practice, the success rate of refining an illusory light talisman was only around half that of a fireball talisman. Damn it, fine, I'll do it. Nguy Tac hesitated for a while, then ground his teeth and made the decision. The more methods he possessed in a fight, the greater his chance of killing the enemy before the enemy killed him. From the way the old man spoke, Nguy Tac was certain he knew formulas for several higher-level talismans as well, but the materials required for those would certainly not be as simple or inexpensive as the ingredients for fireball talismans. Practicing with the illusory light talisman would also sharpen Nguy Tac's refining skill. The old man watched Nguy Tac carefully measure and grind the yellow silk grass and bitter gold chrysanthemum. A trace of approval appeared in his eyes. This shameless brat actually had quite a few strengths. His mind was sharp, and despite his greed, he did not blindly chase things far beyond his current reach. While Nguy Tac devoted himself to refining illusory light talismans, a brocade-clad young attendant from the Kim Nok Pavilion respectfully entered Ko Na's chamber in the Treasure Pavilion. Secretly, he was extremely nervous. Ko Na, whose beauty was almost unreal, wore only an ordinary purple palace-style dress. She sat before a table, fatigue was visible on her face. Her expression itself was not especially severe, yet her entire body radiated an icy distance that seemed to keep everyone 1,000 miles away. The table was covered with various medicinal herbs. A rich herbal fragrance filled the room. This was not the first time the attendant had seen Ko Na. Even so, her stunning beauty and cold aura still made his heart tremble. What kind of man could ever make a woman like this look at him with genuine affection? What kind of person could make the famous Ice Beauty smile? The attendant sighed inwardly. Then he stepped forward with impeccable manners and placed a pouch of spirit stones on the table. Manager Ko Na, because you were occupied with pill refining, I did not dare disturb you earlier. I've only now come to deliver the payment. The void fusion pill you entrusted to Manager Dian sold for 4,000 low-grade spirit stones. After deducting the 1,000 paid in advance and the auction fee, the remaining amount is 270 mid-grade spirit stones. Please count them. Ko Na shook her head slightly. There's no need. I trust you, Lu Tuong, and I trust Manager Dian. Thank you for waiting. The young attendant named Lu Tuong bowed respectfully. Manager Ko Na, Manager Dian asked me to pass along one message. Pills refined by you appear on the market very rarely. If you could provide the Kim Nok Pavilion with one pill on the level of the Void Fusion pill each month for auction, then from now on, every other transaction between the Kim Nok Pavilion and the Treasure Pavilion will be charged only half the usual commission. I understand. Ko Na nodded. You may go. She watched the respectful young man leave the pill refining room. A bitter smile slowly appeared on her face. She understood exactly why Manager Dian had made the offer. If the Kim Nok Pavilion regularly auctioned rare pills refined by Ko Na, the auctions would gain greater prestige. More cultivators would attend. Business would rise. The terms were also extremely favorable to the Treasure Pavilion. The problem was that Ko Na was the only person in the entire Treasure Pavilion capable of refining pills at that level. And the ingredients were not cheap. Recently, she had many other matters to deal with. Producing even one void fusion pill every month might not be possible. She wearily rubbed her temples. After swallowing a white medicinal pill, she called out, Doc Ko Vu Van. A black-robed cultivator appeared at the doorway. The young miss has already broken through to the 5th level of the Divine Sea Realm, the man said before Ko Nya could ask. The icely true art you gave her has also been cultivated to the 3rd stage. Junior sister has already reached the 5th level of the Divine Sea Realm. Ko Na was startled. Correct. The black-robed man remained cold and expressionless. The young miss has extremely high talent for cultivating both cultivation arts and spells. I understand. Ko Na nodded. Continue having the people of Thiet Sach protect her. The black-robed cultivator withdrew. Ko Na watched him leave. A trace of genuine happiness finally appeared in her eyes. Transparent boundless crystal powder had been mixed into cuttlefish oil. The resulting dark blue liquid boiled inside a small refined steel furnace, sending rings of blue ripples across the surface. A faint fragrance drifted through the room. Once the crystal powder had completely dissolved, Nguy Tac carefully poured the dark blue talisman ink into a clean jade bottle. He did not wait for it to cool. He immediately dipped the golden silk talisman brush into the bottle and allowed the brush tips to absorb the ink. Then, without hesitation, he lowered the brush onto the golden yellow talisman paper prepared before him. The golden silk brush moved across the paper like drifting clouds and flowing water. Whenever the rune pattern curved into fine, intricate arcs, Nguy Tac controlled the brush with such delicate precision that even the old man in green watched in fascination. The first rune layer of the illusory light talisman was extremely complicated. At Nguy Tac's current speed, if nothing went wrong, he could finish the runes of a fireball talisman in roughly half the time needed to drink a cup of tea. This first layer took him a full cup of tea. Tiny rune lines gradually connected into a pattern resembling a chrysanthemum in full bloom. Every stroke shimmered with flowing light. Sweat gathered across Nguy Tac's forehead. At this stage, the greatest limitation on his fireball talisman refining was no longer his success rate. It was not even his drawing speed. It was the strain his spiritual awareness caused by maintaining an extreme level of concentration. Once his mind became too exhausted, a single mistaken judgment would cause the entire refinement to fail. The brush glided through several final curves, then Nguy Tac lifted it from the paper. The entire rune formation suddenly lit up. For a moment it looked like a flower blooming in an instant. Damn! It worked! Nguy Tac froze, then shouted through clenched teeth. Refining the illusory light talisman had been even more difficult than he expected. He had practiced for 2 full days before successfully completing the first rune layer even once. This brat only needed 2 days to finish the first stage? The old man in green had to admit that Nguy Tac truly possessed exceptional talent for talisman refining. Among the refiners the old man had encountered in the past, people attempting the illusory light talisman for the first time had normally needed at least 7 or 8 days before they could successfully finish the first rune layer. And the old man knew that the second layer was actually somewhat simpler. As long as Nguy Tac did not make some absurd mistake, his chance of completing it should be fairly high. You only have the time of 2 incense sticks for the next stage. The old man looked at him. Maybe you should think about what you're going to shout when you succeed. Damn! Nguy Tac immediately forced down his excitement. He rolled his eyes, wiped the sweat from his face, straightened his clothes, and poured true essence into the half-finished talisman. The golden illusory light talisman, covered in dark blue runes, suddenly released a screen of light. Here we go. Nguy Tac carefully positioned himself in front of it. The light emitted by the half-finished talisman fell across his body. He shouted, "Freeze!" A pulse of true essence struck the runes on the talisman. The projected screen of light seemed to lock into place. Then it suddenly collapsed inward and vanished into the talisman. This step was called image fixing. Whatever image the illusory light talisman was meant to produce later had to be recorded at this moment. Nguy Tac chose his own image. His plan was simple. During a battle, or while hunting demonic beasts, he could suddenly create several copies of himself. For a moment, the enemy would not know which one was real. The old man in green had told him that the images produced by an illusory light talisman were extraordinarily lifelike. Only when something physically passed through the illusion would it distort. Damn it. This one has to succeed. The instant the image-fixing stage finished, Nguy Tac snatched the half-finished talisman and placed it on the table. He quickly poured true essence through the golden silk brush, forcing out every trace of the old ink. Then he dipped the brush into a fresh mixture, made from vermilion azurstone and cuttlefish oil. Without wasting a breath, he began drawing the second formation across the dark gold talisman paper. Mystical lines flowed from the brush tip. The blue-green ink soaked into the paper and merged strangely with the existing dark blue pattern. The combined runes gradually became glossy and deep blue. Large drops of sweat rolled down Nguy Tac's forehead. Only his right hand remained perfectly steady. The golden silk brush moved rapidly, yet with extraordinary control. Damn it! Suddenly, Nguy Tac felt his strength slipping away. Only a few runes remained, but his mind felt as though it could no longer continue. His spiritual awareness was exhausted. Refining an unfamiliar talisman consumed far more mental energy than refining fireball talismans he already knew by heart. Nguy Tac ground his teeth and forced his eyes wide. He struggled to keep both hands steady while concentrating every remaining thread of attention on the brush tip. Veins stood out across his forehead, yet his hand remained light and smooth, moving like a breeze. At that moment, there was none of his usual shameless grin. His expression was completely serious. Finished, Nguy Tac lifted the golden silk talisman brush. The entire rune formation changed into a glossy blue color. His body immediately went limp. He collapsed into the chair. His back was soaked with sweat, but his eyes were filled with excitement. He was no longer the ignorant little wandering cultivator who had first begun refining fireball talismans. He did not need to test this one. Just from the talisman's soft glow and stable spiritual aura, he knew the illusory light talisman had been successfully refined. The hardest step was always the first. Now that he had succeeded once, the second and third talismans would not be nearly as painful. Wahahaha! 2 days later, Nguy Tac's strange laughter echoed through the stone house. There were now 2 Nguy Tacs standing inside. They looked completely identical. The only difference was that one held nothing, while the other held 5 golden illusory light talismans. The one holding the talismans was the real Nguy Tac. He reached out and touched the illusion. His hand passed through it as though entering a curtain of water. The false Nguy Tac rippled across its entire body. So lifelike? Nguy Tac laughed happily. This is more than enough to fool demonic beasts that don't have much intelligence. Over the last 2 days, he had successfully refined 6 illusory light talismans. At last, unable to resist, he used one to test the effect. The result left him extremely satisfied. As long as the illusion remained still and no one physically touched it, it was almost impossible to distinguish from the real person at a glance. Right, old man. Nguy Tac looked thoughtful. Only making copies of myself is too limited. I should go record some other illusions too. With 5 illusory light talismans now containing images of himself, Nguy Tac still wasn't satisfied. He looked at the old man in green. I should capture the image of some terrifying spell or powerful demonic beast instead. If I run into someone timid enough, maybe I can scare him into turning around and running. Excellent idea, the old man replied dryly. Then all you need to do is find some powerful cultivator who is willing to cast a frightening spell for you within the time of 2 incense sticks, or capture a 4th or 5th tier demonic beast and somehow convince it to obediently pose for you. The old man gave him a sideways glance. To be fair, he had already thought Nguy Tac was unusually clever for deciding to record his own image. Originally, the old man had only taught him the illusory light talisman as a way to sharpen his talisman refining skill and spiritual awareness. Right, that is a problem. Nguy Tac's face fell. If he belonged to a major sect, finding a powerful expert to cast a spell for him, or a strong demonic beast that could be restrained long enough to record its image, would not be difficult. But he was only a wandering cultivator. Even if he somehow learned a powerful spell himself, he could hardly control the image recording process and cast the technique at the same time. The time of 2 incense sticks. Nguy Tac stared into space, thinking. Then a thoroughly shameless grin appeared on his face. Old man, what do you think would happen if, right in the middle of a fight, an entire herd of pigs suddenly charged past my opponent? What the old man in green froze. For a moment, he looked close to fainting. Wahahaha! As soon as another half-finished illusory light talisman was ready, Nguy Tac rushed out of the house. He ran through 2 small alleys and found a livestock enclosure containing several dozen plump pigs. Chuckling to himself, he spread the talisman's light over the entire herd, fixed the image, and hurried home. A short while later, accompanied by laughter disturbing enough to make anyone's skin crawl, a brand new illusory light talisman was completed. The old man in green was speechless. Nguy Tac did not make just one. He refined 2 great white pig illusory light talismans. The old man honestly had no idea how an enemy would react if, in the middle of a life-and-death battle, an entire herd of fat pigs suddenly came charging across the battlefield. After enjoying his own brilliance for a while, however, Nguy Tac eventually sprawled across his bed and sighed. Old man, when do you think I'll finally reach the 4th level of the Divine Sea Realm? I've already practiced every part of the Golden Serpent Lightning Art that I can use right now. I can't learn the next stage until I reach the 4th level. And lately, why does it feel like I'm absorbing spiritual energy from spirit stones less efficiently than before? The old man in green nodded seriously. Unless you obtain some extraordinary medicinal pill, there is no way to drastically shorten the time needed to reach the 4th level. As for why your absorption feels slower, it is because your true essence and spiritual energy are currently in a nearly full state. Cultivation is much like eating. If you want to develop a larger appetite, you need to move around and burn what you've eaten. If you continuously use your true essence, exhaust it, restore it, and repeat the cycle, your body's circulation of true essence will become more active. Your capacity will gradually expand, and your efficiency will improve. If you keep eating while doing nothing at all, naturally your appetite won't grow. Nguy Tac's eyes brightened. So you're saying I should go hunt demonic beasts? That would make my cultivation progress faster? No wonder people always say powerful cultivators are forged through battle, not by sitting at home cultivating all day. It would indeed allow you to absorb spiritual energy more efficiently and advance faster, the old man replied. But in theory, you don't have to hunt demonic beasts just to consume true essence. You could simply stand in front of a wall and keep firing azure water blades until your true essence is empty, then cultivate again. Nguy Tac snorted. You think I'm stupid? Why would I stand around attacking empty air when I could hunt demonic beasts and earn spirit stones at the same time? True essence still has to be restored with spirit stones and chi recovery powder. He sat up. Damn it. I'm going out tomorrow to hunt some beasts. Spiritual light flashed. 3 cultivators wearing dark golden cultivation robes stepped out of the teleportation formation at Thun Min Mountain. All 3 looked to be around 30 years old and possessed impressive cultivation. The 2 broad-shouldered men on the left were both 4th-level Divine Sea cultivators. The man on the right, who wore gloves that shimmered with black light, had reached the 5th level of the Divine Sea realm. Their robes appeared to have been woven from flexible, refined metal and clearly possessed considerable defensive power. Near the chest of each robe, 2 ancient characters had been embroidered. Kimthu. They were all cultivators of the Kimthu Palace, another low-level wandering cultivator who doesn't know how high the heavens are or how deep the earth is. The black-gloved cultivator had barely stepped away from the teleportation formation when he glanced into the distance and gave a cold laugh. Far ahead, an ordinary-looking low-level cultivator in a plain blue robe was hurrying toward a valley within the endless mountain range. Going alone? He's practically looking for death. The low-level wandering cultivator the 3 Kimthu Palace disciples had noticed was none other than Nguy Tac. He had come out specifically to temper himself through real combat. In the eyes of those 3 cultivators, however, Nguy Tac was already a dead man. Thun Min Mountain was notorious for having large numbers of 3rd-tier demonic beasts. Under normal circumstances, a 2nd-level Divine Sea cultivator could handle around 2 2nd-tier middle-rank beasts. A 3rd-level Divine Sea cultivator might be able to deal with roughly 2 3rd-tier middle-rank beasts. All 3 men could tell that Nguy Tac had not yet reached the 4th level of the Divine Sea realm. At Thun Min Mountain, it was entirely possible to encounter 6 or 7 3rd-tier beasts at once. Even 4th-level Divine Sea cultivators normally formed teams before hunting there. Yet Nguy Tac was not merely entering Thun Min Mountain alone. He was heading directly toward Vanza Valley. Vanza Valley was extremely humid. It was filled with strangely shaped boulders, and because the climate was warm and wet, the vegetation grew with astonishing density. From the outside, the place looked even more chaotic than Liu Ha Alley in Linchniak City. The valley was filled with first and second-tier poisonous insects and demonic beasts. More importantly, it was a gathering place for the third-tier middle-rank flesh-winged scale serpent. Even a fifth-level divine sea cultivator might not come back alive after entering. Nguy Tac, however, showed no sign of concern. When he was still several dozen zhang from the mouth of the valley, he poured true essence into the spirit heaven jade pendant, which still had 3 activations remaining, putting it in a state where it could be triggered instantly. Then he activated a dark golden talisman. A brilliant golden barrier immediately formed around him. It resembled an enormous bell, with glowing runes drifting across its surface. Protected by the barrier, Nguy Tac openly and confidently walked straight into Vansa Valley. He had traveled a little more than 200 zhang into the valley when 2 black streaks, each roughly 3 feet long, suddenly shot down from a tree on his left. Smack! They slammed into the golden barrier. Nguy Tac stopped. The 2 attackers were bizarre snakes. Their bodies were dark blue-green, almost exactly matching the color of tree bark. Beneath their necks grew 2 short limbs resembling bird legs, along with a pair of fleshy wings. Their heads were large and triangular. 2 blood-red eyes made them look even more sinister. These were the third-tier middle-rank flesh-winged scale serpents for which Vansa Valley was infamous. Unable to break Nguy Tac's protective barrier, the 2 serpents immediately became enraged. They hissed sharply. Their speed was astonishing. They could fly, turn, and circle freely through the air, repeatedly biting and smashing against the golden barrier. From inside, Nguy Tac could barely distinguish their bodies. They looked like 2 streaks of black light constantly slamming into the shield. A short while later, 3 more flesh-winged scale serpents arrived and joined the attack. 5 third-tier middle-rank demonic beasts were now surrounding him. The scene looked terrifying. Ha ha! The old man was right. Despite suddenly being surrounded by 5 dangerous beasts, Nguy Tac did not panic. Instead, he happily pulled out a white talisman, a first-tier ice mist talisman. The moment he activated it, freezing white mist surged outward around his body. Inside the cold fog, the movements of all 5 flesh-winged scale serpents immediately slowed. Golden Serpent Lightning Fork! Azure Water Blade! Nguy Tac watched for a moment, then accurately launched both techniques at the particularly ugly serpent that kept ramming the barrier as though it wanted to bite his head off. 10 golden serpent-like bolts of lightning twisted together into a crackling fork and struck the beast. The flesh-winged scale serpent convulsed and fell toward the ground. A shining azure water blade immediately slashed into its neck. Water-like light burst across its scales. The attack did not seem to cause serious damage, but before the serpent could recover, Nguy Tac fired another golden serpent lightning fork and another azure water blade. The beast began convulsing wildly. This time, both attacks struck one of its fleshy wings. A large section of the wing was severed. Seeing one of their companions being beaten so miserably, the other 4 flesh-winged scale serpents became even more ferocious. Their red eyes bulged as they attacked the golden barrier with renewed madness. Nguy Tac ignored them completely. Golden Serpent Lightning Fork, Azure Water Blade. Golden Serpent Lightning Fork, Azure Water Blade. He continued hammering the same paralyzed serpent. After taking more than a dozen attacks in succession, the flesh-winged scale serpent finally died with its eyes still wide open. Ha ha! If the 3 Kim Thu Palace cultivators had witnessed the scene, they would certainly have decided Nguy Tac was some kind of lunatic. The moment he killed 1 flesh-winged scale serpent, 5 iron wire snakes with bodies as hard and gleaming as steel joined the battle, and Nguy Tac actually laughed even louder. Boom! A fireball suddenly exploded in the middle of the 5 first-tier iron wire snakes. 3 were blasted away in miserable arcs. Wahahaha! Come on! Send a few more! After throwing out a fireball talisman, Nguy Tac immediately returned his full attention to another flesh-winged scale serpent. The truth was that Nguy Tac appeared so arrogant only because he and the old man in green had carefully chosen Vansa Valley after a great deal of discussion. Originally, Nguy Tac had planned to visit the copper mine at Dai Thon Mountain. When the old man heard about the enormous scarlet-armored beetle that lived there, and especially about the short black glowing arrow embedded in its back, he suspected the arrow might actually be a magical treasure. According to the old man's long experience, even low-tier demonic beasts could become terrifying if they lived long enough or happened to consume some rare heavenly treasure. Scarlet-armored beetles were a type of demonic beast that could continue advancing as they aged. The older they became, the stronger they grew. A scarlet-armored beetle that survived for a full 1,000 years could even spit blazing flames. Judging from Nguy Tac's description of the enormous beetle's appearance and size, the old man was certain it had lived at least 800 years, and possibly close to 1,000. At that age, the most terrifying thing about a scarlet-armored beetle was not its flames. It was the thickness of its shell. Even the spells of a first-level heavenly circuit cultivator might not be able to break through the armor of a beetle that old. Yet the short arrow had pierced straight through its shell and remained embedded in its flesh, while continuing to emit black light. That weapon was definitely not ordinary. The problem was that the mine tunnels were all interconnected. No one knew what other demonic beasts might be living inside, and the tunnels were narrow. If an entire swarm of scarlet-armored beetles suddenly flooded toward Nguy Tac, there would be almost no room to escape. After discussing the matter, Nguy Tac and the old man abandoned the idea of visiting the copper mine for the time being. They chose Van Za Valley instead because the old man understood flesh-winged scale serpents extremely well. These serpents were classified as third-tier middle-ranked demonic beasts and had a fearsome reputation. Over the past several years, quite a few cultivators had died to them, including 5th-level Divine Sea cultivators. But according to the old man's experience, most of those deaths occurred because the serpents had launched sudden ambushes. Their greatest advantages were their lightning-fast speed and ability to fly. In simple terms, fighting one was somewhat like fighting a flying sword that could freely twist, turn, and change direction in mid-air. However, the actual impact force of their attacks was weaker than that of most third-tier demonic beasts. As long as a cultivator possessed a defensive barrier strong enough to withstand their collisions, and a method of limiting their speed, they were not especially difficult to kill. Nguy Tac had come fully prepared under the old man's guidance. The barrier surrounding him came from a second-tier Golden Bell Spirit talisman, and could last for roughly the time required to burn one incense stick. The first-tier Ice Mist talisman reduced the flesh-winged scale serpent's speed. Meanwhile, the Golden Serpent Lightning Art he had obtained from Lam Dao Nhat could paralyze them. Combined with the Azure Water Blade, it was an almost perfect match. A short while later, Nguy Tac poured an entire bottle of key recovery powder into his mouth. Another flesh-winged scale serpent was pinned down by repeated attacks and finally killed. "Don't rush, you're next." Nguy Tac grinned and pointed at the serpent in the middle. "Yes, you. I told you not to be impatient." Then his expression suddenly changed. "Damn, what is that?" The bushes nearby erupted with violent rustling. Branches snapped. Leaves were crushed aside, and an enormous green serpent, almost like a moving hill, slowly crawled into view. Its entire body was covered in green scales the size of coins. Its thickness was comparable to a large water barrel. Just looking at it was enough to feel its savagery. Even more frightening, the front half of the serpent's body had risen upright like a standing man, as though merely crawling was not high enough or intimidating enough for it. Its enormous blood-red mouth looked capable of swallowing Nguy Tac whole. But the most distinctive feature was the swollen growth on its forehead. From that growth extended a translucent golden horn nearly 1 foot long. A one-horn thunder kui? Damn it! The moment Nguy Tac saw that glass-like horn on the giant serpent's head, he let out a miserable scream. Without hesitation, he activated a fireball talisman and hurled it toward the beast. Then he turned around and ran.